Thursday, October 20. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara. Here. Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert here. All are present. We do have a quorum. Would you join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. For those who are present, if you have a noise-making device, I would ask that you turn it off or to silent mode so as not to interfere with our electronic communications. I have a couple of proclamations to present this morning. We'll do so at this time. The first proclamation is to recognize, it's entitled A Day Without Water. And fortunately in our county, we haven't had that kind of experience, but I'm going to ask Ian Fanning Hughes to join me at the podium this morning from Public Works Department. And I think Susan Pekarik, who's Director of Johnson County Wastewater, is also with us this morning. So Ian, I'll present this to you in recognition of the work that the county does, and also Water One. Should emphasize that our water supply for most of us in Johnson County is provided by Water One. Some of the smaller cities provide also their own water supply, but any comments you'd like to make, why, welcome to do so.
Thank you so much. All right. So good morning. Thank you all. Today, Johnson County joins elected officials, water utilities, community leaders, educators, and businesses from across the country as part of the 8th annual Imagine a Day Without Water, a nationwide day of education and advocacy about the importance of water in our lives. Imagine a Day Without Water was envisioned as that advocacy and education day that asked Americans to think about how their day or how their life would be without water. The focus of this year's event is to invite people to take the One Water Pledge, learn more about where water comes from, where wastewater goes, and how reliant our drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems are to each other. We also use this day as an opportunity to bring awareness to the vital infrastructure that handles water that is essential to our everyday lives. This includes the drinking water infrastructure that delivers clean water to our homes, the wastewater infrastructure that takes water away from our homes and treats it, and the stormwater infrastructure that moves stormwater, protecting our lives. On this Imagine Day Without Water, I encourage citizens of all capacities to imagine what life would be like if water did not flow from our faucets, if our toilets could not flush, and if our creeks, streams, rivers, and lakes ran dry. Many communities across our country don't have to imagine a day without water. And I'm sure you've heard in the news about drinking water crises, extreme droughts, and wastewater capacity issues across the country and our region. We're very fortunate in Johnson County to have communities and elected leaders who see the critical value of water in our lives. From our own departments, Johnson County Wastewater, the Stormwater Management Program, to the cities across this county who manage their own stormwater, their own wastewater, some of their own drinking water, to our vital partners like Water One, who provide clean drinking water to our homes. Water truly is our county's most valuable resource. This day also, or this week also coincidentally happens to be the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, and it marked a turning point to protect water quality in our nation's waterways and ensured that our communities could properly treat wastewater, protecting our most precious natural resource and public health. And finally, we, Susan, the entire wastewater department, myself, and the Stormwater Management Program, we would like to take this opportunity to recognize the board for their continued support and investment in high-quality stormwater and wastewater infrastructure that ensures the quality of life and protection for Johnson County residents.
Okay. Thank you. Ian, thank you very much. I think Susan wants to make a comment also.
Well, I'll just be brief. I can't say it better than Ian did, but I do want to thank everyone here for their support and just reemphasize that we have
a really wonderful and resilient infrastructure here in Johnson County because of the support of the board, the support of the community, and it's really something we don't want to take for granted. We want to think about every day. The Clean Water Act anniversary really allows us to reflect back on the last 50 years, and the country doesn't have rivers on fire anymore. You can take a romantic walk on the beach with your loved one because there's not raw sewage and trash washing up on the shore. We get to enjoy our beautiful waterways, our lakes, our rivers, our streams. And so thank you very much again for your support. And what a great day to reflect on Imagine a Day Without Water.
Well, Eon and Susan, thank you very much for your commitment to and the great work that you do. You know, I think we're all aware of the drought conditions in the western part of our country and the Colorado River situation. There may be people who will have to do without water or a limited source of water. Natural disaster, you know, that happened in Florida recently, and infrastructure was destroyed. And then several months ago, the situation in Flint, Michigan, where their water was contaminated. So we, I think, sometimes don't give a second thought about opening the faucet and clean water comes out. But it is very, very important. And thank you to your good work. And I want to say a special thank you to Water One and their staff and their board, as well as the cities who provide drinking water for their residents. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And next, I'm going to ask Sarah Van Landijk to join me at the podium. Sarah is Executive Director of the Johnson County Arts Council, and I have a proclamation this morning recognizing their work as well as other work across the country. And I will say this, Johnson County Parks and Rec Foundation, along with private sources, have funded a spatial public art exhibit in Meadowbrook Park. It's called The Gateway. And if you have a chance to go and look at that, it is an amazing piece of artwork. And so even though the Arts Council was not directly involved, that's part of the work that the kind of work that our Arts Council does across the county. So Sarah, I'll present this proclamation to you. You have several people with you. If you'd like to identify them, introduce them, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman Eilert and Commissioners. My name is Sarah Van Landijk. I'm the Executive Director for the Arts Council of Johnson County. With me today is Allison Bowman, our Administrative Assistant and a practicing visual artist, Kate Allen, who is our Board President, and Jennifer Wampler, who is our Advisory Board Chair. And I know in the audience are several members of the arts community, artists, and arts organizations and advocates, and we are really glad that they are here. I thought I'd just say a few words. The humanities, creativity, and arts are essential. We love to say the arts are essential at the Arts Council. I even have a really obnoxious button that promotes that. If you'd like one, let me know. The arts are small businesses contributing to our local economy. They enhance education, support community well-being, empower creative expression, and strengthen us both as individuals and as a community. In short, they are a constant through line to innovation, prosperity, and thriving people and places. And we are grateful to the Board of County Commissioners for your partnership in celebrating the transformative impact the arts and humanities have in Johnson County. So thank you very much.
Sarah, thank you very much. And thanks to all of those who are involved in the Johnson County Arts Council, and appreciate your good work. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is the public comment portion, which we'll turn to at this time. For those who are speaking either virtually or in person, your comments should be limited to 2 minutes. And for those who are speaking in person, there's a modem on the podium which will track the time. And if you exceed that time, then I'll be required to ask you to conclude your comments. So we'll begin with those who have signed up virtually. The clerk will please read the first name.
Thank you. We do have Debbie Detmer. Debbie Detmer.
Hi, I am Debbie Detmer of Shawnee. As reported by Cates, CONAC was giving super administrator access privileges to the Chinese contractors in China. They were deliberately hiding from their U.S., Australian, and Canadian EMS clients. These contractors in China were literally writing the code for CONAC's EMS platforms and apps, such as Pole Chief and Field Force Manager. That kind of access means the code writers can literally do whatever they want. Any digital information passing over such EMS systems can be stolen, altered, or as we now know, downloaded to China. I ask again, how do we know CONAC drew the line at only stealing and storing U.S. poll workers' information in China? What would have prevented them from stealing or altering voter registration information, voter rolls, ballot images, Dropbox locations, or anything else that was transmitted over these compromised platforms and apps? I'm concerned about the election, but I also know people that were poll workers that are concerned about their personal data. Someone could destroy your life with identity theft. I think the pervasiveness of the infiltration is far greater than what Johnson County is willing to admit. What was discussed in that executive meeting on voting security this week where the sheriff and the DA were disinvited by Ed Eilert? Stop and cancel CONAC software in Johnson County. Go to paper ballots in Johnson County. Also, the ACIP voted yesterday to recommend adding the experimental COVID shots to the children's school shots. It passed 15-0. This is so alarming. Parents, remember that you can and must give a religious exemption for vaccines mandates for school. That has been in place for years. This includes the COVID shot if it is added. Protect your child. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Cassie Woolworth. Cassie Woolworth.
Is she muted?
I'm sorry, guys. I was trying to get unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Okay, my name is Cassie Woolworth. I'm a resident of Johnson County. You know me. A federal judge on Wednesday denied a conspiracy-laden effort to stop the use of ballot drop boxes. Also quashed was a separate motion to seek a temporary restraining order to stop election officials from using drop boxes and electric voting machines because of the California fiasco. State lawmakers may well consider banning the use of drop boxes despite no evidence they serve as a conduit for fraud. Even Scott Schwab says they don't. So they may still do that unless you vote them out. Early voting starts this Saturday. In Johnson County, our sheriff, Cal Hayden, still can't count and thinks the elections were stolen, still spending our tax monies to chase his dreams of overturning a 2-year-old election, but not his, mind you. He's asking for more money for his troops, although when you have a waste of resources in the sheriff's department and they claim to be critically understaffed, we don't know what the government's doing with our money. So it makes all of our jobs more difficult. Mike Kelly said that at a recent candidate forum. To stop this, we need to vote. Early voting starts Saturday. Do politics belong in schools? Does my child reading "Not All Boys Are Blue" really impact your life? What about guns? Do you think they belong in schools? The legislation we have in the House right now passed laws that college kids can open carry on campus. You know they drink, right? You know they do drugs, right? You know there's things like that there. So yes, solid, let's give 18-year-olds guns. They're sending identification kits to the parents in Texas. They're not gonna mess with the guns. We don't want to take those away. To stop this, we need to vote. Early voting starts Saturday. Vote for people who know math and science. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Now we have Katie Roberts. Katie Roberts.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Katie. I live in Olathe, and my address is on file. I have lived here all of my life. Honestly, I used to never pay attention to politics or who was running my city. I blindly trusted the elected officials. I didn't really look up until Donald Trump was president. And I started to see why people like most of you hate him, which is the very reason I voted for him, because he was a businessman and not a politician. Everyone knows politicians tell you empty promises just to get elected. Then once you're in office, you work for special interests instead of the people. President Trump is the only president in my lifetime who actually worked for the people. He wasn't a puppet and cannot be controlled or blackmailed into submission. I can see how this doesn't work out well for the oligarchs who pull the strings in the shadows while killing America softly. Trump breathed life back into America, and he was in the way. Therefore, he needed to be removed and never in power again. He exposed politicians just like you. Every week, your constituents beg you to care about them. You ignore them. Your words are meaningless, and actions or lack thereof speak volumes. Concerns regarding election fraud, for example, are immediately dismissed. I would have much more respect for each of you if your response instead was, we understand your concern and welcome an investigation to determine if our elections in JOCO have improvement opportunities or not. But the fact is, none of you can prove that it's not happening. Our vote is our voice, elections have consequences, and I urge you all to be more transparent. Have a spot at the table for everyone, including the sheriff, who, like President Trump, is working for the people. Gain the trust of the people back by restoring our city. Make JOCO great again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Now in person, we have Ben Hobart. Ben Hobart.
Ben Hobart, Westwood Hills. A majority of this board has never rescinded or modified its strong recommendation of April 29, 2020 that all eligible persons get the clot shots. This resolution remains in force and effect, but is of uncertain application. Is a majority of this board recommending that every eligible person get every possible booster, despite all the mounting evidence of adverse medical events, including death, myocarditis, pericarditis, strokes, embolisms, heart attacks, miscarriages, and turbo cancers, among others? Despite the lack of any safety data or human data with respect to the bivalent boosters, it appears that the Johnson County Health Department continues to act as drug pushers for Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna. Note Sanmi Areola's statement in the Johnson County Magazine, The Best Times for September-October 2022. Vaccines continue to be the single most important tool in preventing serious illness, hospitalization, and death. This is a demonstrably false statement. Please recall that the clot shots have demonstrated a very low absolute reduction in infectiousness, less than 4% in all age groups. Please also recall that the CDC had to back away from its deceitful COVID death count and acknowledge that only 6% were arguably solely attributable to COVID. The other 94% had multiple comorbidity factors such as obesity, diabetes, hypertension, chronic lung or heart disease, etc. The average number of comorbidity factors was 2.6. The most important tool against adverse medical results is your God-given innate and adaptive immune systems and your individual health. In that regard, there is a growing body of evidence that vitamin D deficiency is correlated with adverse health results. Get a blood test. Determine if your vitamin D level is not at least 50 nanograms per milliliter and consult a doctor about supplements. Note, Mr. Areola makes another false statement when he indicates everyone should get vaccinated and boosted to limit the spread of infection in our community. The CDC has already acknowledged that the so-called vaccines, the clot shots, do not limit the spread of any virus. Don't be deceived. Strengthen your God-given immune systems. Don't rely on false assurances.
Thank you.
Now we have Carl Fitzy. Carl Fitzy.
Hello, good morning. My name is Carl Fitzy. I'm a retired cardiologist, and I live at 10910 West 120th Terrace, Overland Park, Kansas. I would like to bring to your attention, as you all know, that the poll chief software from Connect has led to the arrest of the CEO of that company, and it's found out that they were shipping all of this personal information to China, where they maintain a total operation that pools together all information about all possible Americans. Even kids who sign up for TikTok have their names and any information they can put on it in that facility. Now, some counties have already dropped out of the poll chief software because of fears about this and the fact that Mr. Yu, head of the company, has made comments in Chinese on the Chinese media that imply that he knows what they are doing with that data. He knows it's part of the Chinese war that they are in with us. They do not want to go into a shooting war with us. They want to nibble away at every possible thing they can that we use to support our country. Now, I want you to remember this also. All the voting machines, especially ESS and Dominion, that are used in the United States are owned by the Chinese communists, bought through a Swedish bank. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg spent his $100 billion on machines in Pennsylvania just to make it more efficient? No. I want you to keep in mind that the companies, ES&S, sold the rights to use their software to Dominion, so that the fact that we have ES&S has nothing to do with how sound that software is. The University of Michigan should be consulted to look into this situation. They are the experts on these computers. Mr. Haldeman there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now we have Maria Holiday. Maria Holiday.
Good morning. My name is Maria Holiday. My address is on file. When I looked at the budget agenda yesterday, or not the budget, but the agenda yesterday regarding budget, I was very concerned. I think it's coincidental that 4 years ago this week, prior to her election, Commissioner Hanslick was bemoaning the spending of $10.5 million on voting machines that had not been properly investigated, and she called that expenditure irresponsible. And now here we are, facing security issues and having executive meetings regarding it. And then today, just a few days later, we're ready to give away $10 million to NGOs where we have little oversight and little transparency for the people. I urge the board not to abdicate its fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. It seems to me we would be wise to not go on a spending spree today when we still have not heard what's to become of the security breaches that we have experienced, what they are, how much it's going to cost to repair them. There's too much information that we don't have before we go spending a lot of money. I think we need to put the brakes on for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, that completes the public speakers that have signed up. Thank you.
Was there someone who signed up yesterday online? Did I hear correctly? I did, yes. All right, go ahead. Come to the podium. State your name and address.
Shara Collins, Overland Park. And I am just going to be Captain Obvious today. Our country is on the verge of a nuclear war. You guys, as selected servants, have not only turned on the people, but you're complicit in genocide by human experimentation with bioweapons. You've destroyed our local business economy. You've poisoned our water supply using alkaline hydrolysis to cremate human remains and recycle them back into the wastewater system, and used on our crops and livestock. Yes, Kansas is one of the few states that legalized this process. And worst of all, you're destroying our children's future via the deadly experimental jab, which is sterilizing the reproductive systems and literally killing them. # sudden deaths. Not to mention the grooming and the mess with God's design of man and woman. There are only two sexes, man and woman. This board is acting like a childish gang of thieves. You're tossing around like $13 million today that's completely unaccounted for. The people demand a comprehensive bookkeeping of all accounts stated. So we would like you to make that public to everyone, every single penny of it, every single line item. You've disabled our republic with non-certified voting systems connected to the internet, and now we know the software's been hacked. You've been caught red-handed. The truth of the matter is there's a clear abundance of evidence of election fraud on about 40 different fronts. The board has chosen to ignore all the people. The board is 100% non-transparent. The most perfect example is your emergency meeting on Monday afternoon regarding the Connex security breach. This isn't just about personal identifiable information. It's about, it's about stacking the election systems. The hypocrisy of this board is incomprehensible. Becky Fast and Janae
Thank you. I'm
Hanslick
sorry, your
scream
time
and
is up,
cry
Ms. Collins. Thank you very
transparency.
much.
Yet
Your
they
time is
run-
up. I'm sorry. Please, your time is up. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? No, I think you know, there's opportunity to sign up before the meeting, and there's opportunity to sign up online.
So you don't, I can't have 2 minutes?
All right, go ahead, go ahead. I encourage everyone to follow the protocols. State your name and address, please.
Potter, author of the book Deadly Spin, speak to the latest New York Times article on Medicare Advantage being one of the biggest transfers
Did you state
of
your
wealth.
name and address?
Oh, I am so sorry. Vicki Klein.
Can you get closer to the mic? Because
I will.
Thank
Can we start all over? No?
Please, go right ahead.
One of the biggest transfers of wealth is neither Medicare nor is it an Advantage. Presently, audit information shows that 8 out of 10 health insurance companies promote sicker patients and give doctors large bonuses to have them report patients to have illnesses they really don't have. The insurance companies are charging back to the government astronomical fees. Many legislators are ignoring this accountability because they put money into the campaigns, or the insurance companies pay media companies for their propaganda. We're being programmed to believe we're sicker than we have, and by authority figures promoting manipulated data and paying off scientists, doctors, media, and government employees. Congress has multiple hearings since Medicare Advantage came in 1966 under President Johnson. Congress says this is a lack of oversight, therefore they create new government departments to oversee it. There are a few journalists who have tried to expose this, like Fred Schultz of Kaiser Health News. It's ignored, and the people point to the CDC as their source of authority. The CDC no more is under fire right now. Their fraudulent information on vaping data, along with aiding the World Health Organization to relax guidelines on the consumption of sugar for kids because Coke products were coming into developing nations where they aggressively wish to expand their markets. The CDC stated the other day, we don't make recommendations to the states for vaccine routines for schools. Then I want to know who does. The Better Medical Alliance and other worthless private government dark alliances are money laundering mechanisms. It is from this fraud that we see that the CDC has a high rate of incompetence and big pharma wins in the commerce of vaccine drugs. Please do not assume the government can do a better job in making decisions for ourselves and our children. It is an obvious agenda that they are setting up the children to be constantly sick and slaves to a system that is nothing short of evil. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion. I would simply say this. We have a protocol that people follow, and I'm asking you to continue to do that. You have the opportunity to sign up online. You have the opportunity to sign up in person before you come into the room, and please follow that so we're fair to everybody. All right, we do have.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make?
Pardon?
May I make just one comment?
Well, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. If there is someone that wants to speak on any of the items that are here, that you can speak when that item appears on the agenda, and they don't have.
Yeah. Again, that should be known. When those items come up, If there's someone who wants to speak to item 4, 5, or 6, you're welcome to do
Correct.
so.
I just wanted to let them know that if they wanted to stay and if they had some comment on an item, that they would have that opportunity.
That's always been part of our process.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have one note for the record this morning. I will be signing Administrative Resolution Number WD 22-037, enlarging the privately financed sewer district and provide for the assessment of all applicable fees, charges, and levies of the Consolidated Main Sewer District in the vicinity of 11550 West 187th Street. That concludes notes for the record. We'll go to the consent agenda. The clerk will please read the proposed consent agenda item.
Item number 1, consider approving the September 29th, 2022 business session minutes. And item number 2, consider authorizing receipt of the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Funding, LATCF, received from the United States Treasury in the amount of $100,000, creating a project account in the county's grant fund, and authorizing the reallocation and expenditure of county general fund reserves for fiscal year FY 2022 in an amount not to exceed $55,000, and for fiscal year FY 2023 in an amount not to exceed $55,000, to include $10,000 in estimated interest earnings for the purpose of managing the LATCF.
Is there a commissioner who would like to have one of these items considered separately? Ms. O'Hara?
Yes, item 2, and just for transparency for the public to understand this $100,000 from the federal
Okay,
government.
so noted.
Thank you.
Is there any corrections or additions that need to be considered for the minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve? Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the September 29th, 2022 business session minutes.
Hanslick, second.
Allenbrand made the motion. Hanslick seconded the motion to approve the minutes as presented. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion approved. Mr. Thompson, next item.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Maury Thompson, Deputy County Manager, here to stand for questions regarding this item.
Could you, Mr. Chairman,
Go right ahead, yeah.
could you please just briefly outline the process that this $100,000, that this is coming from the federal government, and just give this just a very brief outline so that the public understands?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the title of the funding is the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund. Johnson County is receiving this $100,000 as a result of the local assistance component of that, not related to the tribal consistency component of it. $100,000 in funding. The other piece that I would point out is this is very broad funding. It can be used for anything this governing body so chooses, with one exception, and that is for lobbying services. Only exception.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted the public to be aware of the few details of it. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, along those lines, your frequent reports of the federal funds that come in, how they're handled and how they're expensed, you make those reports frequently, and all that information is public information for anyone who wants to secure it. Is that right?
Thank you. Yes, Chairman, it is. I was going to make that comment again to remind the body and the public, all of that information is on the website, and all of those spending reports, so accounting for every dollar of those federal funds is available to anyone.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, Ms. Allenbrand?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion whenever you're ready.
Okay. Ms. O'Hara, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I understand that this is all public information, but as we're going through an open meeting, it just is incumbent upon us to be as transparent as possible. And so as people are viewing this, then they will have a slight understanding, and that they can go, that now they know that they can go and dig in deeper if they wish to do that. Thank you.
Yes, that information has been available since we started, since those federal funds began to come into the county. So, Ms. Allenbrand, you have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the board authorize the receipt of the Local Assistance and Tribal consistency funding, LATCF, received the United States Treasury in the amount of $100,000, creating a project amount of county grant fund and authorizing reallocation and expenditure of county general fund reserves for fiscal year FY 2022 in the amount not to exceed $55,000, and the fiscal year FY 2023 in the amount not to exceed $55,000, to include $10,000 in estimated interest earnings for the purpose of managing the LATCF.
Myers, second.
And Allenbrand made the motion, Meyer seconded the motion to authorize the receipt of the federal funds from the U.S. Treasury as recommended. Any further questions or comments? If not, clerk, please call the roll. Excuse me, Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you. So this will be increasing the general fund budget by $55,000. $55,000 in 2022 and then fiscal year 2023, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor, motion carried. Turning to the action agenda, item number 3.
Application numbers NW 22-244-PP and NW 22-245-FPLE. Consider request from Brad Kiekbosch and Jean Diska, applicant landowners, for preliminary and final plat approval for 4 residential lots on 40.75 acres to be known as Homestead Ridge on property zoned RUR Rural District located at 12835 Homestead Lane in Section 27, Township 13, Range 22.
Ms. Kirks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Commission. Good morning. Michelle Cricks, Johnson County Planning. This is a request for a preliminary and final plat for 4 10 nominal acre residential lots on approximately 40 acres on a currently unplatted lot zoned rural district. The subject property is located southeast of 127th Street and Homestead Lane, east of DeSoto, as indicated here on the slide. Here is an aerial view of the subject property. There is currently an existing residence down at the very southwest corner of the property, and there are 2 existing driveways, one servicing the existing residential property, and there's another driveway at the very northeast corner of the property off of 127th Street. Here is an aerial view of the surrounding area with the subject property outlined in blue. And you can see that the general character of the area is the larger lot, single-family residential. This is an excerpt of the final plat, and it is zoomed in so it's a little bit more visible. Staff reviewed the minimum infrastructure requirements required by the county's zoning and subdivision regulations and confirmed that this proposed plat meets all of those requirements. There is an 8-inch water line along 127th Street and along Homestead Lane. And along this portion of the plat, there is an existing fire hydrant at the southwest corner of the plat and also at the northeast corner of the plat. And to comply with fire code, there will be a fire hydrant installed between lots 2 and 3 to serve those interior lots. And this is just a quick copy of the preliminary plat. And here's the final plat. And the final plat does comply with all the required zoning and subdivision regulations, and no plat exceptions or other infrastructure waivers were requested. Planning staff did recommend approval of this item, and the Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board heard this project at their September 19th hearing and recommended approval of both the preliminary and final plat with stipulations. One person from the public did comment on the project. We do have one of the applicants are here in person, and a representative for another property owner is available on Zoom for questions. And with that, I am now available for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions of the staff? All right. Is the applicant present? Either in person or online?
Yes,
Does
we
the
do have
applicant wish to make any
somebody in person
comments?
and online, yes.
Yes. If you'd like to make comments, now is the time to do so.
No
All right.
comments.
Okay. No comments from the applicant. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? We do have one, as I understand.
No.
No, sir, we just had
You said there was
somebody
somebody online?
No, not for this item.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, if there's no one else to be heard, it's back before the commission. Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion. I move to approve a preliminary and final plat to be known as Homestead Ridge for the reasons and subject to speculations recommended by the zoning board.
Hanslick, second.
Motion has been made and second to approve the application as recommended by the zoning board and presented. Any further questions or comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 4, resolution number 079-22, application number NW22-241-CUP-OL. Consider request from Kenneth Clark, applicant and landowner, for a conditional use permit for an oversized accessory building on property zoned RUR, Rural District in Section 28, Township 13, Range 28, located at 12985 Lakeshore Drive.
Ms. Kirks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Commission, Michelle Cricks with Johnson County Planning. This is a request for approval for a conditional use permit for a 960 square foot oversized accessory building on 1.9 acres zoned rural district located at 12985 Lakeshore Drive. The property is located west of Olathe as indicated here on this slide. Here's an aerial of the subject property highlighting existing improvements, which include a single family home, a 1,200 square foot accessory building, and a 100 square foot utility shed. With the existing total of 1,300 square feet of accessory building footprint, plus a proposed 960 square foot building, the total cumulative building area on the property would be 2,260 square feet, which would exceed the maximum permitted by right. And along the southern boundary of the property, a 30-foot wide easement is present to provide access to the lot directly to the east. The lot also has mature deciduous trees present along the north and east property line, as well as along that access easement. And adjacent to the easement and the east property line and a portion of the north property line is a 6-foot tall wood privacy fence. The accessory building would be set back from the south property line 36 feet and the east property line 45 feet, complying with all setback requirements of the zoning district. This is just a couple of pictures, just kind of highlighting the subject property to show the dense vegetation and the 6-foot fence and how far back that would be from Lakeshore Drive. The proposed accessory building would be 16.5 feet tall and open on the west side, constructed of metal siding and painted to match the existing accessory building on the property. The accessory building would also be used to store a recreational vehicle and a trailer. Planning staff did recommend approval of this item. The Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board heard this project at their September 19th hearing and recommended approval of the conditional use permit for a term of 20 years with stipulations. No one from the public spoke on this item. And that concludes my comments, and I'm available for questions.
Questions of the staff? Ms. O'Hara?
Yeah, just a comment. I just want to point out how careful we are on these special use permits to make sure that the visual impact of a garage or a storage shed is very carefully considered, and yet we are not taking that same consideration in when we approve or would be in the process of approving solar farms, and that we have decimated our comprehensive plan by allowing those kinds of things. I just want to note how careful we are, and when we do have applications to come in, that we have that same consideration. Thank you.
Ms. Allenbrand.
Mr. Chair, I do have a motion, but I would like to say this is in my district, and I have worked very closely and have been on 2 different planning commission and also with the American Planning Association. Okay. And I take respect to our planners and our zoning, the detail that they go through and the criteria that they look at. And so with that, I approve this, and I have a motion when you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, again, is the applicant present? Does the applicant wish to make any comments? All right, so noted, no comments. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? If not, it's back before the commission. Ms. Allenbrand, you have a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move to adopt resolution number 07922, which approves conditional use permit for a new 960 square foot accessory building for the total of 2,260 square foot of accessory buildings on the property for the reason and subject to the speculations as set forth by the resolution.
Do I hear a second?
Myers second.
Allenbrand made the motion. Myers seconded the motion to approve the resolution, and the application for the conditional use permit is recommended. Any further questions or comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 5, resolution number 071-22. Hold a public hearing on October 20th, 2022 to consider vacating 2 plat notes on the plat of Mole Acres, a subdivision in the unincorporated area.
Thank you. Johnson County Legal Department, Bob Ford.
Excuse
Mr.
me,
Chairman,
Mr.
this
Ford.
is a public hearing.
Public hearing is open. Mr. Ford from the Legal Department. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a request from the owner to vacate 2 plat notes that were put on a preliminary plat in 2003 and then carried over onto the final plat. Neither plat note was factually accurate. They were based on preliminary discussions with the landowner. The vacation of these plat notes will not affect the stipulations or conditions that were actually imposed. It changes nothing for either the landowner or the county. It simply showed up as a cloud on the owner's title in a recent title search, and they're going to transfer the property, I believe, from the original grandparents to a grandchild. This is property that is at Gardner Road and 127th Street. It's owned by the Mall family and has been since the 1800s. The home is near Gardner Road and 127th Street, and this is simply to correct a title error.
This is kind of a procedural process, as I understand it.
It is, and staff recommends the vacation
Right.
and has no objections.
Right, thank you. Other questions? Ms. Allenbrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a kind of a cleanup, but it is interesting. I'm glad you made the comment about the 1800s because that's how far back it goes within this family. So Mr. Chair, when you're ready, I'm ready for a motion.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item?
Your Honor, there are family representatives here, but I don't know that they have any interest in addressing.
Okay. Well, if there's no one who wishes to speak, the public hearing is closed. The motion would be in order. Ms. Allenbrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the board adopt resolution number 071-22 to vacate the 2 plat notes containing in the plat of Mole Acres, and the first relating to a declaration of covenants and restrictions, and the second relating to rural exceptions and filing for a declaration and waiver.
Myers second.
Allenbrand made the motion. Myers seconded the motion to approve the resolution as presented. Any further questions or comments? If not, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried.
Thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you. Item number 6.
Resolution number 074-22, conduct a public hearing on October 20th, 2022 at approximately 9:30 a.m. to adopt a revised storm sewer design code and revised standard specifications for road and bridge construction for developments in unincorporated Johnson County, Kansas.
Public hearing is open. Mr. Vos.
Good morning, Jeff Vos with Public Works. It's like Once I get control here, then. Somehow I can't advance. There we go. All right, so this is Resolution 07422. This is to update sewer design code and design standards for road and bridge construction and unincorporated. We're reaffirming the 2006 version of APWA 5600 design criteria, so there's no change there. We're switching to specification section 2200 of APWA, the KC Metro version for asphalt on road and bridges, and then updating to the 2015 KDOT specifications for all other items on road and bridge construction. And I'm here for questions.
Okay, questions? Ms. O'Hara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I contacted Mark Huggins, who's on the Planning Commission, and he's an engineer with Payne and Brockway, just to get a little bit of background information on this. And I guess my question is, these specifications, how much is this going to, is this going to create a cost increase, or is this?
No. Are you referring specifically to the 5600?
Yes.
No, in fact, we're not changing anything here at all. We're just reaffirming the ones that we previously had for conformity in the resolution, so we can get rid of the old resolution.
Okay, because Mark's input was that it's basically consistent with practices of the cities in Johnson County, and it will help create a consistent target for design professionals.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Other questions? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? If there's no one to be heard, the public hearing is closed. A motion would be in order. Ms. Hanslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to adopt resolution number 074-22 to adopt revised storm sewer design code and revised standard specifications for road and bridge construction for developments in unincorporated Johnson County, Kansas.
Allenbrand, second.
Hanslick made the motion. Allenbrand seconded the motion to approve the resolution in regards to the items that need to be reviewed as far as storm sewer as well as road and bridge in the unincorporated part of Johnson County. Ms. Fast?
How often, do you have to update these? Do they come out, is it a yearly or?
No, in fact, the 2006 is a previous version. The current version is actually 2011, so it's been quite a while since there's been an update. Our stormwater group is actually working with APWA and the other metro areas to kick off a new revision for APWA 5600 to make some changes in that, and we're looking at an 18-month to 2-year window to get that accomplished.
When they make these updates, what does that mean for your equipment, for your skilled workforce? Then that requires a lot of training or not?
No, it's more on the engineering side, and the stormwater engineers keep up with that so they're usually not huge changes. They're relatively minor technical changes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, the motion is before us. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 7, resolution number 073-22, conduct a public hearing on October 20th, 2022 at approximately 9:30 a.m. to adopt resolution number 073-22 to adopt the street construction and storm drainage standards for subdivisions 2022 edition.
Public hearing is open. Mr. Bose.
Jeff Vos with Public Works. This is to revise our street construction and storm drainage standards for subdivisions. It's been 2006 since we've done a major update with this. It was presented to the Planning Commission on August 23rd. They did not have any comments and understood the need for the changes. In the main body of this, we're updating specifications to current KDOT items except for the asphalt, which is going to be the APWA Section 2200 that was just approved with the last item. All text concerning how to construct items have been removed and directed to the appropriate construction specifications, and references to Overland Park changes standards have been changed to KC Metro APWA standards for those items that aren't included in our document.
All right, thank you.
Let's
Question?
see, a little bit more here.
All right.
General revisions to the detail sheets, we updated asphalt surfacing types to meet county standards, add slope clarification notes for entrance design to make them safer, and material changes throughout the standards to update the current standards and availability. We also added some new standard sheets, such as this one, adding lane width and shoulders to existing asphalt roads. We added some typical section details to give more guidance on how to construct the subgrade of the road. And we've also added minimum infrastructure notes to the typical sections, so it makes it easier to see what needs to be done with developments. And with that,
Okay, all right.
I'm done.
Questions? Ms. O'Hara?
Can you clarify the shoulder requirements?
so with the standards that we have, typically for subdivision roads, it shows a 10-foot shoulder for those.
Okay.
So this is different than our section line roads.
Correct, it's within subdivisions.
Correct.
So how does that differ from what our requirements are now?
Well, I mean, these are no, those are unchanged.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this item? If not, public hearing is closed and a motion is in order. Ms. Hanslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to adopt resolution number 073-22, approving the street construction and storm drainage standards for subdivisions, 2022 edition.
Myers, second.
Hanslick made the motion, Meyer seconded the motion to approve the items in regards to the street construction and storm drainage standards. Any further questions or comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 8, resolution number 075-22, consider adopting revised policy and standards to govern the construction of private roads within unincorporated Johnson County, Kansas.
Mr. Vos.
Jeff Vos with Public Works. This resolution sets forth all the requirements for private roads in the county, and we're not making any changes at all except for Part A of Section 3 to incorporate the street construction and storm drainage standards that was just approved with the previous item.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Again, is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? If not, a motion is in order. Ms. Allenbrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to adopt resolution number 075-22 to adopt revised policy and standards to govern construction of private roads within the unincorporated Johnson County, Kansas.
Hanslick, second.
Allenbrand made the motion. Hanslick seconded the motion to approve the resolution as presented. Any further questions or comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. There are 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Item number 9.
Resolution number 076-22, consider implementation of certain road construction and storm sewer drainage standards for the unincorporated area of Johnson County, Kansas.
Mr. Vos.
Jeff Vos with Public Works. This sets the policy for where the stipulations of the previously adopted resolutions apply. Developments that enter into an improvement agreement prior to the end of the year can use the older 2006 standards. Otherwise, they'll need to be using the new 2022 standards. And that's where all the changes in that resolution.
Okay, all right, thank you. Questions? Again, anyone present wish to speak to this item? All right, it's back before the commission. A motion is in order. Ms. Hanslick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to adopt resolution number 076-22 relating to the implementation of certain road construction and storm sewer drainage standards for the unincorporated area of Johnson County, Kansas.
Allen Brand, second.
Hanslick made the motion. Allenbrand seconded the motion to approve the resolution as presented. Any further questions or comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allen Brand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Motion carried. Item number 10.
Consider approving and authorizing an increase of $2.9 million in expenditure authority to the transit budget using existing transit fund reserves and increasing the contract amount with WHC KCT LLC by $2 million from $2,436,305 to $4,436,305.
Mr. Powers.
Chairman and Commissioners, good morning. Josh Powers with Transit. This item is in regard to the transit pilot projects that the board authorized on November 4th of 2021, which included a number of transit service adjustments, including the expansion of the microtransit service area, as well as expanding microtransit service hours by adding Sunday service, as well as adjusting the microtransit fee from $1.50 to either $3 or $5, depending on distance traveled. These various transit service adjustments were put into place on July 5th of this year, and as you are aware, ridership on microtransit continues to be strong and ever growing. Even with the fare increase, ridership in August of 2022 was up 37% over the July ridership, which totaling more than 14,000 rides in that month. Microtransit is on track to provide more than 120,000 rides in 2022, which would be a 50% increase over 2021. The FY 2022 budget for transit was approved prior to the authorization of the transit pilot projects. As you know, our contracts include some buffer to provide for eventualities and service variances. Based on the various previously authorized service expansions, the Transit Division needs increased budget expenditure authority in the amount of $2.9 million to cover those increased costs related to the various transit service adjustments that we implemented this year. And we would also need to amend the county's contract with our microtransit service provider by $2 million in order to pay for the service expansion related to that specific service. So 2 pieces of this, budget authority in the amount of $2.9 million, contract amendment by the amount of $2 million. So you can see that those are kind of separate topics, but only microtransit required a contract amendment based on the additional expenditure. This increase to Transit's expenditure authority will utilize existing transit funding, and no additional county support is required here. Lastly, we are exploring a number of options with our microtransit vendor in order to better understand how we can control costs and optimize transit service provision, in the future. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, Ms. Allenbrand, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate adding the Sunday, and I'm hearing lots of good feedback, especially from the handicapped citizens and being able to go out on the weekends. It was almost like they were being punished because, they didn't have transportation. So I really appreciate that. And I really haven't had any complaint calls for some time. So obviously, things must be going better. And I really appreciate you bringing back those numbers because obviously it's increased.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you. So are there any stipulations as to who can use this service, or is this open to the general public?
General public.
Okay, so shouldn't we be focusing our resources on people with handicaps or have issues with not being able to afford transportation. I'm just a little concerned it's almost doubling what we have put into it. And I'm just wondering if we need to step back and refocus our resources on those in need and not have this open to the general public, because obviously our costs are exploding. And I know that we've had this conversation before. And I know one population that that we've heard from district court judges is that it would be great if people with court dates had this transit available to them and that they knew about it. And it just seems to me that we need to be focusing on populations who are very much in need. And if people can't make their court dates, then it cascades into very serious repercussions for the families. So I'm just wondering if we should be looking at this in more of a focused area, and perhaps we should delay decision on this until we have a committee of the whole and kind of figure out where we're going, instead of just throwing another $2 million, which is nearly doubling what we have already put in. I'm just very concerned, and this board has spoken to the fact. In fact, that's why we raised the rates from $1.50 to $3 to $5, depending on the distance. So I'm wondering if we don't need to go and take a broader look at this, because this is a budget buster. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Josh Powers. With transit, there's a number of things you touched on there. So first and foremost, this really is somewhat procedural, right? These were previously authorized pilots by the board, and the board authorized transit to utilize existing funding to do this service. So we need to get authorization for this expenditure, because this is costs that we are incurring in this fiscal year. As far as corrections, great point. I'm glad you brought it up. We're speaking to Department of Corrections currently about how we can deploy our services, including microtransit, to get people to exactly those types of needed destinations. And then lastly, microtransit is general public transportation, which was the intent as we brought it forward to the board and what the board authorized. We do focus specifically on vulnerable populations with our paratransit service, which also offers on-demand or subscription service. So I think we're trying to capture as many people to be able to avail themselves of this services as is possible.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Powers, for making those statements. I think that was much of what I was going to respond. I do think it's important for us to relook at the fare. Mm-hmm. I think the fare needs to be adjusted. Seems like it's something that has to occur because it's a pretty good situation for most riders compared to finding other sources of transportation at a much higher cost.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hanslick?
Yes, a couple of questions. One, just to confirm, eligible people who have, by virtue of their income or a disability, can qualify for reduced fares in all of our system, not just microtransit, but on every system, although we're not charging for bus right now.
That's correct.
And secondly, and I appreciate the concern about making sure that our most vulnerable people have access to transit. I think it's also important to realize that our transit system is an economic development tool. Just a couple weeks ago, I talked to a restaurant owner in my district, and to my chagrin, he said, I am paying $60 to $70 a day to bring my workers over from Missouri via Uber or Lyft. And at that time, I said, well, wait a minute, we need to sit down, and I know I've talked to Mr. Powers and Mr. Bolin about meeting with him to look at how can his workers better utilize microtransit and the regular bus system to get to work and cut down on those business expenses. So I think it's important that we recognize how many businesses and how many employees depend on our transit system. And I agree with Commissioner Myers. We've had these conversations at the Transportation Council about what is the appropriate balance of fares on the microtransit. And I know we'll be having some more conversations, and I know you're planning to propose possible changes. But again, I think it's really important to recognize how many businesses, employers and employees count on our transit system. It's not just people who have disabilities or low income, but I don't know if you have anything further to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Josh Powers with Transit. I think what I would say is, setting COVID aside, we're just 3 years into this pilot, and we've just implemented a few months ago in July these changes. And so you're absolutely correct that we are going to continually refine, whether it's fare, whether it's service area, whether it's eligibility, whether it's destination or origin. These are all levers that we can pull to adjust the system, and so those policy choices will be brought forward to the board.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner O'Hara brought up some good points, but you do have a very active committee that participates, and the majority of the people writing this are people that don't have cars, they don't have a way, and so you think about going to and from work each day, what it's costing you to get on that, to use that fare. It can get expensive. I mean, I've had them, give me a list of how much they're spending every week to try to get to and from work, and some of them during the time of COVID, they had trouble and difficulties getting rides and had to use Ubers, and sometimes it's as much as $65 for one way if you're going from Gardner or from another location. So, and that's happened with people that are handicapped and not able, don't have a vehicle, nor can they drive, just going to the grocery store. So they ride transportation Monday through Friday to get back and forth to work, and then to go to a restaurant or to go grocery shopping, so.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Powers, help me refresh my recollection, because when we started down this road with this pilot program 3-4 years ago, you heard a lot of fussing from this dais about my term, big box buses appearing to be empty or underutilized, and we were trying something different. And you and others proposed this extended pilot, comprehensive pilot, even though at the time we thought that on a per ride basis it might be more expensive, but we were trying to get an assessment of its viability and utility. And as I recall, Mr. Powers, you had indicated that you would be back to us from time to time providing an assessment to help us make decisions regarding the continued use of this pilot or expansion or even elimination versus the big box buses. So building on what Commissioner O'Hare and Commissioner Hanslick referred to, do we have a date in mind to have a study session or a committee of the whole to kind of bring this analysis back? And I know you have to go through certain processes, and I respect that, but do you have a timeline on when you expect to do that next?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Commissioner. Josh Powers with Transit. We don't have a firm date. We expect 2023 for a committee of the whole for an update. The pilot programs that the board authorized in November of last year, implemented in July 5th of this year, will need some time to operate in order to get data that we can assess and bring back to you. But I would expect that we would have a committee of the whole in 2023, probably mid-year, but we will work with you and with CMO to determine that date.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Powers, in regards to the vulnerable population, as I recall originally, the microtransit was focused in that area and continues to be. And I don't know whether you've had any conversations with the administrative judge, but if there are issues that need to be publicized for the courts, I'll be glad to visit with the administrative judge and see if we can increase the opportunities there for those who need it.
Thank you, Chairman.
Ms. Hanslick?
Yes, to that point, I was wondering, and maybe Commissioner O'Hara can speak to it, but when I was the liaison to the Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board, we actually had a federal grant to look at utilizing how to help people get to their court hearings. And one of the ideas was using some kind of phone app or texting and letting them know where the buses, they could get a bus, or how to use microtransit. And I'm not expecting you to answer that, but I don't know if JCAB is still looking at that.
I am not aware of that, but I can check into that. But I'm just wondering if this board isn't getting ahead of itself for doubling this allocation at this point, and perhaps we need to have the conversation in a CAL before we proceed with this. I just think that we need to have our eyes wide open, because we're going to be, if we approve this, then next year we will be building on top of that. And I just think that we need to be focusing our resources on the most vulnerable and make certain that that's where we're at. And I don't see any indication that we have any data on that. And also, did this go through the Transit Committee? I'm asking because I know that I have my appointee on that committee has indicated that there has been few meetings, and you might want to talk about that.
Sure. So these pilot programs did go through the JCTC, and we adjust our meeting schedule based on, not every month do we have relevant policy questions to bring to the committee. So out of respect for their time, we don't always meet, but we do maintain regular communications. And the one point I'd want to highlight is that the board authorized the use of this federal funding in the amount of $3.5 million a year for between 3 and 5 years. So the board has already authorized the expenditure use of those funds this way, and we're actually coming in under that 3.5 amount with the 2.9 for fiscal 2022. So all in all, I think this follows the direction that we've gotten from the board, and is coming in less than we had projected.
I have one follow-up.
Sure.
It stipulates where the $2 million is going. Where is the $900,000 going?
So as I mentioned during my comments, there were multiple transit pilots that were implemented this year, including more frequency on fixed route, a new express route 520 out of Strang Line. So the $2 million adjustment is to bring up the microtransit contract to meet that expanded service. The remaining $900,000 would be related to those other transit pilots.
Okay, so we will be looking forward to a CAL at least early 2023 on this issue?
We're happy to work with the manager's office and the board to bring whatever meeting you would like to have forward.
I think that it's very incumbent upon us to make sure that our resources are going to those in most need. And one thing is that we don't want to be in competition with our private sector on the greater population. And so I just think that we just need to be careful about that. And so that, to me, that we need to be focusing on the most vulnerable and really honing into what our goal is as far as providing services for those most in need.
But while microtransit is general public transportation, a large percentage of our users are people who identify as having a disability.
Can you provide some information on that? Or, I mean, I don't know how you would gather that information.
So our software tracks that. I mean, they have to let us know that if they use a mobility device, we send the appropriate vehicle so it can hold multiple wheelchairs. So it's data that we definitely collect.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would just simply, I think, remind everyone that from the beginning, when we proposed the microtransit program, all of those issues were examined, and they continue to be examined, as Mr. Powers said. The recent increase in the pilot was authorized and implemented in July, so we'll have additional data going forward. And all of those issues are always part of the discussion and evaluation. Other comments? Ms. Allenbrand?
No, Mr. Chair, but I have a motion in the
All right. Well, is there any, excuse me, Mr. Myers, I'm sorry.
I was going to say I had a motion ready when you were too. That's,
You're the transit guy, so I'll recognize you at the appropriate time. Is there, Ms. Hanslick?
I was just going to ask Mr. Powers to verify. I mean, what we're talking about, bottom line, microtransit is wildly popular, and it's a matter of supply and demand. There is more demand than we have supply, especially in terms of our budget. So we are going to have to make some decisions going forward, either to increase the supply, which would cost more money, or somehow control the demand potentially through changes in fares for people who don't meet the disability or low-income criteria. That said, I think we also need to, as I've said before, consider the economic development impact. And you might want to speak just briefly about the impact of driver shortages on our ability to fully implement all of the aspects of the project at this time. That's a big challenge, and we're going to have to be talking about that also.
Yes, Commissioner, you're exactly right. Josh Powers with Transit. The driver operator shortage that you've heard about, the staffing shortage you've heard about from basically almost every department in county government as well as on the private side, we are not immune from that, and it is a huge challenge. I would say it's our second largest challenge behind the demand for the service. And so, yes, there are some aspects of the pilots that we brought to you and were authorized back in 2021 that we have not yet implemented because we just don't have the staff to do it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am?
Maria Holliday. I served on the Transportation Board at one point recently when they first started to implement this, and so I just have a couple questions that haven't been addressed. And I'm wondering if Mr. Powers can tell us what is the actual cost per ride for a microtransit ride? For the average, I understand there's different distances.
And what was the other question?
The other question I have is directly related to Commissioner Hanslick, the economic development impact. Do we have data on how many businesses are using this? I'd like to know what those numbers are, and as far as bringing people over. And the third thing I'd like to address, and some people have brought it up, is, and I've brought this up when I was on the Transportation Council, is can we not have a tiered pay system, not based on distance, but we have people that, because of being a vulnerable population, they're low income, or they have, maybe they're not using paratransit for this particular ride, and there's a rate for them or no rate. But what about for the general public? So if we know what that cost per ride is, I mean, it is an expensive service we're providing, and I have no problem providing this service, but let's not just be a really cheap Uber and be have people taking advantage. Let's make sure that we're being wise and fiduciaries. So how much does it cost?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Powers, can you speak to that? I know you've looked at that data.
Yes, Josh Powers, Transit. So there were three questions there. If I don't hit one of them, I'm sure Ms. Holliday will let me know. The average cost, every ride is different. And so if you go 3 miles, that's going to be a particular cost. But as Commissioner Allenbrand mentioned, we have riders who are coming from Gardner to Shawnee Mission Parkway, so a longer trip. The average cost is $20 a ride, approximately $20 a ride. That fluctuates during time of year based on the number of people riding, but as the chairman has pointed out from the dais before, with microtransit, the more people ride, the higher the cost. It's kind of the inverse of fixed route. And so as Commissioner Hanslick has mentioned, what we're trying to achieve is a balance of services. And you can do that by implementing various policies, limiting where people can travel, limiting when people can travel, limiting who can travel. But to this point, the direction from the BOCC has been It's a premium service that goes from your door to the doorstep of wherever you're going. The second question, I believe, was in regard to private employers and who utilize microtransit to get to people. That's a very difficult set of data to gather. We don't ask people where they're traveling. That would be it's just not a practice that you would implement. So it's very difficult to measure the longitudinal economic impact of transportation. However, we're moving 900 people a day, over 12 and 13,000 people a month. Many of those trips are to get not only to employment, but also to healthcare and education and other things that are important for people to travel. So I wish I had a better answer, but that's a difficult one to do. We would really need to do a longitudinal study to get that data. I'm sorry, the last question.
Excuse me, we need it at the mic, but I think, if I can, it was the tier pay system.
We do have a tiered pay system. If you are 200% of the federal poverty amount of income, then you qualify for 50% of the fare. So whatever the fare is, there is an eligibility process for someone who is low income to have to only pay half of that fare. Now, that's also a policy question for the board. If you want to amend the fare structure based on a vulnerability or a specific classification, that's certainly on the table.
Okay, and reemphasize, we need to move forward, but we need to reemphasize that the $20 cost that you mentioned is not to the rider, it's for the cost of the system.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item?
Please come forward.
All right.
Hi, Shara Collins. So this transportation, which I think is wonderful that we are able to offer this to people in need. However, the company WHC KCT LLC their jurisdiction is in Missouri and their business license is in Missouri. So why is Johnson County providing funds to a Missouri licensed business, especially in this grand amount and upping? And this business just became incorporated in 2019.
Okay, Mr. Powers.
Josh Powers with Transit. So anytime we have a transportation contract, we put that out to bid. WHC was one of the respondents and had the most advantageous terms for the county. They are the largest independent taxi service provider in the metropolitan area. So we follow all procurement rules and regulations, and they were the successful respondent.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? One more. Pardon? One more. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Carol Donis here. So I just have two basic questions, and maybe you discussed this in the past, but like with this transit service, does it use diesel or does it use, I'm assuming it uses diesel gas as opposed to just regular gas? And then the second question is, how does, with the cost of gasoline increasing dramatically, it just gets out of control and there's no end in sight, how does that impact the costs for the future, and how do you expect to deal with that? Is there going to be additional costs that you're going to continue to keep raising the costs for the budget on this, or how does that work?
Mr. Powers.
Josh Powers with Transit. Our fleet includes vehicles that use multiple fuels, whether it be diesel gas, gasoline, or compressed natural gas. So we do that as a way to have a variance in our fleet so we're not tied to one specific fuel source. Similarly, the county buys fuel on a contracted futures rate. So the variance in day-to-day that we face as citizens at the pump does not impact our transit budget. We do not pay the market rate. So we do have that long-standing contract in place that limits and keeps our costs down.
Right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else? All right, if there's no one else to be heard, the item is back before the commission. A motion would be in order. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Chair. I move to approve and authorize an increase of $2.9 million in expenditure authority to the transit budget using existing transit fund reserves and increasing the contract amount with WHC KCT LLC by $2 million from $2,436,305 to $4,436,305.
Hanslick, second.
Myers made the motion. Hanslick seconded the motion to authorize the increase as recommended and the use of reserve funds to meet the total requirement required. Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you. So the shortages of drivers, is this going to impede this company from being able to expand the service because they don't have the employees?
So Commissioner Josh Powers with Transit, they are currently staffed at the point where they're stretched, but they're able to provide the service to the expanded zone that we implemented in July 5th. If a different direction was desired by the board in the future to make it just hypothetically, let's say, county-wide, or to expand the zone further, we can't predict what might happen with the labor market. So the hope is that as things loosen up and we get further used to the COVID situation, that more people will come and work for them.
Okay, but my question is that this allocation of $2 million, do they anticipate that they have enough employees to be able to expand the services on Sunday? Or and they are given this money in a do we give it to them as the rides are done, or do we give this to them in one lump sum? And then just explain how that works.
They bill us monthly.
Okay.
And so we pay as the service, after the service has been provided. And I just want to clarify, the expansion that we're talking about is in place. The Sunday service is in place. That began in July 5th. And so, we knew that there would be an increase in cost, which is related to the November 4th item that the board voted affirmatively for. So we expected this to happen.
I really appreciate you giving the clarification. But again, I think that the board needs to, because we've discussed this many, many times, that really we cannot afford to subsidize ridership unless and to the general public, that this has to be more focused on the population in need. And I'm just very concerned about this additional expenditure. I know that we've already approved it through our budget, but it just seems like that it would be better if we would have a committee of the whole discussion so that we could actually understand where we're going to be going forward.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? We need to vote on this, Ms. Allenbrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I just want to let Commissioner O'Hara know and that Josh Powers has been working. We're working with, different plants, different industrial, and there is an opportunity that if something works out with helping with the employees, then they can offset some of that cost.
Okay, thank you very much.
So.
All right, the motion is before us. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
No.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 6 votes in favor, 1 opposed, motion carried. We're going to take a 5-minute break at this time and to come back for the balance of our agenda. Thank you all very much. right, at this time, we'll reconvene from our recess. The clerk will please read the next item.
Item number 11, consider authorizing the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $7,253,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address struggling small businesses, including diminishing child care capacity within Johnson County, and the allocation of $325,000 from the General Fund Reserves Countywide Support Fund for one-time direct payment to the Enterprise Center of Johnson County, ECJC, for a local match and assistance in administering these programs.
Mr. Thompson.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Maury Thompson, Deputy County Manager. As you all know, we reviewed these items during agenda review last week, but I will go into a bit more detail this morning, and of course, happy to stand for questions. I want to begin by making some introductory comments consistent with the question that you asked me earlier this morning, Chairman, about access to all of this information, thinking back to even the CARES funding for a couple of years ago. So as a reminder for everyone, all of that information is located on the county's website. If you go down to the guides section, there is one called COVID-19 Guide, and within that, open that up, you can go to a host of information, but I direct people's attention specifically to the COVID-19 response and recovery. That's where all of this financial information is housed. That includes the ARPA funding, which we're discussing today. It lays out the eligible uses, the allocation, all of our operating reports, those financial reports that you referred to, Chairman, and performance reports that we have to complete and submit to the federal government on a regular basis. There's also the Emergency Rental Assistance 1 and 2 that you may recall. All of those reports are there. The CARES Act funding is laid out. State impact funding, you may remember we received, was it about $7.5 million through the state of Kansas. That money is laid out there. There's a section that talks about the community impact, the difference that these funds have made in the community, and then a community comment section. I'd finally note on that information, every presentation that I have made to this board can be located there as well. All that information is there. So if you have questions, I'd encourage anyone to take a look there. And as I've stated previously too, anyone has questions after they look at that, I'm always happy to attempt to answer questions about that.
And that information has been presented at a public meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Turning then to the specific action in front of us, again, I thought a little bit of context would be helpful. So the board may recall when we allocated the CARES dollars previously, we really looked at 5 impact areas for the community. Those were mental health, digital access, housing, small business assistance, and workforce development. That was one category, and aging services. And we made allocations based around those 5 areas. As we began to turn our attention then to ARPA, saw a little bit of difference in the priorities, and we really narrowed those down to 3, which are small business assistance and workforce development, housing, and then a new, a little broader category that was used, keeping our families and communities safe, and there's a number of items that we'll talk about later this morning. So someone may ask, well, how did you come up with those categories? How we did that was going back and looking at community surveys, most recent community survey that this board had done with the community, looked at the board's priorities that you had established, and then finally just what we were hearing from the community. I think as many of the board members know, and to referred individuals and entities to me, I stay in pretty close contact with the community around the potential distribution of these funds. So we took that into account, again, as we laid out our priorities. When we look at ARPA, and this information is in the information today, we're talking about $117 million. We have allocated or been able to claim, if you will, using the lost revenue calculation, $85 million. That's 73% of the total. What we're beginning to talk about today is what we've called the direct community investments of about $31 million, or 27%. So I tend to characterize that as those one-time community investments. Those have generally been investments through and by county government. Again, I would suggest that they've had an impact on the community, but they were more controlled by county government. The $31 million is direct investments in the community, grants and other assistance directly to the community. I have commented previously that watching how other municipalities have treated or used these funds around the country and around the state, some have chose to, if they were able to, claim all of that as lost revenue, and then government was able to use it or keep it, if you will, themselves. I personally and professionally don't believe that that's perhaps the right solution. I believe that there is an expectation on our community that some of these funds be invested directly back into the community and not kept, if you will, for the government's purpose. So again, a little bit of context, and that's what we're talking about here with this $31 million. So the specific agenda item that the clerk just read is dealing with one of those focus areas, which was small business assistance and workforce development. So as you can see on page 2 of your briefing sheet, there are really 4 different components of this. One is small business grants of $20,000 each. I'll pause here because I've got a number of questions that I received this week, and I want to attempt to address them. One of them was, what is the definition being used for small business? Small business are being defined as a business that has less than 50 W-2 employees, a business who can show a loss of revenue of at least 25% when comparing their 2019 gross revenue to their 2021 gross revenue, and they must show proof the business was physically located in Johnson County before March 1, 2019, and still resides in Johnson County at the time of the application. So again, that's who we're talking about when we talk about small business. This proposal would provide, again, $20,000 grants to 225 businesses in Johnson County. Second item is a child care business program and licensing fees. And again, 2 components here. The first is a child care business program. That's $2 million proposed investment, and then $253,000 in licensing fees. So in conversations with the Enterprise Center in Johnson County, as we began to talk about the impacts the pandemic had on child care, which, again, one of our priorities, and I think we all would agree, an area that's has been impacted in the community, it became difficult to think about how you use these funds for direct child care assistance. If the goal was to make an impact with these dollars, and quite frankly, you provide some funds to a family, they're used quickly, and then what? So tried to come up with a more systemic response to this issue. One of those is trying to incent and grow existing child care businesses. So if you're an individual in the community who's thinking about that may be a job, a career that I want to entertain, this funding will allow Enterprise Center in Johnson County to recreate a program that they'd had historically that they believe was very successful in doing just that. So working with individuals, putting together a business plan, the licensing components, all of that to be a successful, hopefully, child care provider in Johnson County. Secondly, the $253,000, that is for direct assistance to providers to waive the Johnson County portion of their child licensing fees. The state of Kansas has waived theirs for a certain period of time. This would allow Johnson County to do so as well. So again, really incenting, hopefully, individuals to get in and to stay in the business with this support. And then finally on this one is some direct assistance funding of $50,000 and some local match funding for a Kaufman grant for Enterprise Center of Johnson County. I believe Mr. Shackelford addressed both of those items during his budget presentation to the board. It was a sense then that the board preferred to address that using these one-time monies if you so chose to do so. So with that, Chairman, I believe that concludes my comments regarding the small business component before you today.
Clarification, we talk about using the general fund reserves. These federal dollars are in the general fund reserve account under community services, is that right?
Of the last 2 items that I talked about, they are the other, the $7,253,000. They are in that fund, but I want to be clear here, those still have all the federal requirements around them.
Right, right.
So that's the distinction I'm making.
Okay, questions? Ms. Fast?
Yes, about a month ago, I was part of a panel speaking on the difficulty to access childcare, and we have talked about 70% of the women are in the workforce, but in the We United studies showed 29% of income for families goes to childcare in Kansas, and it's just really skyrocketing. And I presented what we're working on, got very positive reviews about the need. There were childcare businesses there, those thinking about, and just the need to expand. You know, for me, this is the single biggest barrier to stable employment right now is childcare, and that we as a county have a role to recruit and retain childcare providers to assist our new workforce that is coming, that we've been developing. So I feel we, as a county, have really a strong role and commitment to, increasing access and affordability for childcare. The one question that I got from a number of people is they would like to have a stakeholder group. We have home-based childcare businesses. We have large, Shawnee Mission Medical Center has, and I don't see that in the documentation, that before they even begin on their programming, that they convene community meetings for input and direction, and have an array from small home-based to larger agency-based to more corporate-based, so that they really get an array of what the needs are and what sort of business support and development they can provide. And so do I need to make a motion to put that on there, or is that guidance that we can put with this? Because, that will take some time and staffing for them.
So thank you for that question, and thank you for that reminder, Commissioner. You have brought that to my attention previously. ECJC would be the administrator of this program on behalf of the county. I am not to speak for them, but I am confident that would be part of their process, and if not, we'll work to ensure that it is. To your question directly, whether you want to make it part of the motion, I would leave that up to the body to determine.
Good. Other questions, Ms. Ansley?
Thank you. I just want to say I am very, very pleased and proud of Johnson County for taking this step to promote the development of child care businesses. When I was the director at Safe Home, there were three major impediments to people leaving abusive situations: housing, transportation, and child care. And even beyond that, I know there are there are couples right now. A big impact on whether they decide to have a family or not is the cost and availability of child care. So this makes a lot of sense to me, that the county would help invest in this, and as Commissioner Fast said, the impact on the labor shortage. If people can have more availability of safe, affordable childcare, they'll more likely to go back into the workforce. So I just wanted to express how supportive I am.
I would just remind everyone, the Enterprise Center of Johnson County is focused on business development, and they have a very, very strong women's business center as part of that. So I think without question, they'll be utilizing that information and that opportunity. Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in May, we were given the document, May 12, 2022, when it was the budget documents. And I have several questions. I'll step back. Number one, I understand that we had $60 million under miscellaneous and community support. And so is this $7 million coming out of that?
Yes, this is coming out of the Community-Wide Support Fund.
Okay, so my question is that we had $51.2 to $61.2 million on one-time expenditures that I understood was coming out of that 60 million. And that was the small New Century building renovation of 7.7 million, airport 12.5 million, nursing center or Evergreen 15 million, elections office parking improvement 6.5 million, presidential election 2.5 million, home delivered meals option 7 to 17 million, new crisis intervention center partnership to be determined. I believe that that's the mental health crisis center. And those added up to 51.2 to 61.2 million without any money being on the mental health crisis center. And my question is, this is what was presented to the board for one-time funding, and I'm just concerned if we go forward with this, no matter our good intentions, then we're going to be lacking in funds to be looking at these other one-time expenditures. And I'm just questioning why the U-turn, because in May, this was what was presented. And I know that we have $31 million in another account, and I don't remember which fund that account is in, but we put these in separate accounts for tracking purposes instead of just having it into the general fund. So that is what I am concerned about, is that we've already identified where we wanted to spend this $60 million that's in the Community Support Services Fund under miscellaneous, and now we're coming in with an entirely different expenditure. I just wanted to make sure that it was coming out of that $60 million. And then out of which fund did we take the sheriff's funding, that 13 million? Was that out of the 60 million, or?
That was out of the Community-Wide Support Fund.
So that was also out of the 60 million?
Yeah, and I think, and you've referred to that 60 million before, and it gets hard to track it back to here because you're looking at budget years across multiple years there versus just looking at this 117 and how it's being spent.
Right.
The list that we provided to as part of the budget document, that was a list of potential things. That was not a plan that staff was proposing necessarily. That was a list of items that had been discussed for the board's consideration.
Correct, but this is a new direction, and I mean, I understand that we have priorities, but I'm just saying that we had this stated in our budget documents that this was recommendations for us to consider, and now we've already spent $13.3 million on the sheriff's salaries, and then if we do another 7 million plus, I mean, that's like 20.
Commissioner, you're again talking about two different items. So the Community-Wide Support Fund is the $85 million, which is back to that suggested list. These items, for the most part here, are talking about the $31 million. So there's not a relationship back to that list.
Well, you said that this is under the Community Support Fund, and that's where the 60 million, these monies are not coming out of the Community Support Fund. I thought that's what I read.
Yeah, go back to the briefing sheet. Of this total, $7,253,000 are out of the $31 million. What is that? The 50,000 plus the 275, those would come out of the Community-Wide Support Fund. On each of these briefing sheets on page 2, it breaks down the funding source.
Okay, say that again, please.
So are you looking page 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you see ARPA, the list, and then you've got the two items.
Right.
Okay, that's part of the $31 million.
million.
And then the second two, you see the label there, it says CSF, or lost revenue, we put in there to be clear. Those are the funding source for those two.
Okay, and then the other thing is that we are giving this money to a non-government organization, an NGO, and is that wise to give this kind of revenue, this kind of money to a non-governmental agency for distribution to the community? I know that we did have experience with them in the first round of the grants to small businesses. And how much money was that they? that they allocated?
$13 million.
Okay.
Last time, yes. And I'll start with that as the first comment. Yes, very exceptional experience with them through that process. From staff, from accounting perspective, from a compliance perspective, excellent work on their part. From responses we got from folks receiving those grants and their interaction with ECJC, excellent response. So a demonstrated track record of knowing how to do this and doing it well. I would suggest, secondly, they have the expertise more so than staff. When you're talking about small business development, that is their business. So they are the experts in doing that.
Okay.
And finally, if I may, so the converse would be for staff to do it with lack of expertise and probably, quite frankly, trying to find more staff to do the work that they're going to be doing on our behalf.
Okay, so this is mostly from the 31 million, but my question
Correct.
is that if we allocate this if we allocate this portion from the 31 million, and we are serious about a mental health crisis center, it looks like that we are really eroding the pool of money that we're going to have for that project. Am I reading this wrong?
Yeah, I think you are, because the money for the crisis center, what we have suggested, again, quite frankly, I think that's probably a number of years into the future for one thing. If and when the board gets there and has a plan for construction, that staff was suggesting, back to that slide you're referencing, that could be the community-wide support fund could be a funding source for that. Again, not this 31. Those still have all the federal requirements tied to them about how they can be used.
Yes, I understand. So the 85 million, that's 60 million that's in the miscellaneous, that went through mainly the sheriff's department to reimburse for salaries, and then it dropped down into the general fund, and then we put it in to this special fund instead of the overall general funds, so for tracking purposes.
For tracking, yeah.
Okay.
So we had 60 million. Where did the other 25 of that 85?
Well, again, I think we're trying to relate two things that don't match up here. One, the 60 million was talking about how much of it was going to be spent in one particular fiscal year,
right,
versus looking over how much we have in total that can be spent over a number of years.
And where did
That's why they don't quite match up.
Where did we park that other 25 million?
Well, all of this money is in the general fund reserve.
Okay, but some of it is specified. The 60 million is specified.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, yeah, right now the 85 is specified, again, as has been claimed under lost revenue. So that's
right.
General fund reserve available to be spent however the body chooses.
But the 60 million is under the community support fund.
Yes, I
under
believe so.
Miscellaneous.
Without seeing your.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Mr. Ishcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thompson, a couple of observations and a couple of questions. I think you're right in terms of segregating the use of these monies in the direct community investment. I think from a global perspective, that's the right thing to do, and I appreciate that you did do that. And I also recognize that we had a conversation back in June in which you outlined and I think the term you used was the framework for the use of those funds. And that was a study session, or a cow, whatever it was in the basement. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate your interest in identifying, I don't think you used it at this time, but previously partnering with certain entities that had resident expertise that we may be able to leverage in order to implement the use of these funds effectively. So three kind of particular questions that I'm wrestling with. In the briefing sheet, you talked about ECJC, the Enterprise Center, small business grants of $20,000 each for a total of $5 million. And by my math, that works out to be $250, but in the subsequent material you handed out, you said $225. So can you explain that kind of that $500,000 gap? are some of those going to be more than 20,000? Or why is there a gap there?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Excellent question. So you've got the direct assistance, the small grants. There will be some marketing expenses that Enterprise Center will have for that. Project administration, tracking client metrics, the 1099 distribution that they're required to do. Again, talking about an advantage of having them, they took care of ensuring all of that federal compliance was in place, so county wasn't doing that. They have an applicant eligibility review and approval process, and business consultation and technical assistance programs. There's going to be, that's kind of an added benefit they're going to bring. Talk to Mr. Shackelford. You get a small business in who's meeting these criteria, so it suggests they're struggling. Well, maybe we need to do more than just give them a check. Maybe they need to come in and have some consultation about, let's look at your business plan. Let's help get you on strong and stable footing. So I appreciate that.
So is that outlined in any of the material you handed out? I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I'm looking at their application. It may not be in what Whit O'Brien reviewed.
The next question, in the analysis portion, it talks about ECJC plans to restart venture lounge program for social settings. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, that is that part of the 500,000, or is that part of the supplemental ECJC appropriation or funding request?
I believe that's part of the small business grant that they're referring to. That consultation piece I just described, that's one component of that.
So is it, okay. And then finally, are there any expectations, and I very much understand and appreciate, and Commissioner Fast, I think, hit the nail on the head, that these child care businesses have struggled for a variety of reasons, and I think support is meaningful. But what I'm looking for is, what is the expectation in terms of actual child care services? I mean, how many kiddos, for lack of a better term, are in need of child care? What is the gap, and how much will this go towards reducing or eliminating that gap? What are our expectations here?
Yeah, the expectation is really tied more to the business outcome, and I believe I understand your question, an excellent one. I don't know that there is a good community sense that I've seen of what is the total unmet need in Johnson County. I mean, we could look for that, and I could do some inquiry. Don't know that off the top of my head. But the real metric, if you will, that they're going to be measuring here is new business creation and expansion of current business.
Okay. Thank you.
And I guess there could be some metric that they'll be looking at, to measure when you talk about new business or expansion, how many new slots were you able to add there?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Maria Holliday. My list of questions again, but this really is my wheelhouse. I have 22 years of operating a private child care and preschool. And as far as diminished capacity, I don't know how throwing money at that increases that, because child cares that closed, by and large, did not close because of a $45 Johnson County fee. They closed because the continuing education that was imposed by the state of Kansas exceeded that of what I had to do as a teacher in the public school system, and exceeded that of what my friends had to do that are RNs. So there was a cost associated with that and a time associated with that. And you can't take any more children than what the state allows. So there's a cap on that, and there's a cap on income. So you really would have to do what Mr. Thompson is suggesting, in that somehow enticing people to change careers or to open a new center. but I'm not sure. I think it's very important to find the number that he said he doesn't have right now is, do we really need more childcare in Johnson County? Is there a lack? I think that's probably not as difficult to find out. I mean, I think you could call Child Care Aware or even the Family Conservatory here in Johnson County and get that information on what kind of numbers that they have and what kind of openings they have from a month to month, how many openings people have. But I do have a couple of questions that haven't been addressed, and that is, what strings are attached to these monies that are received by these businesses? So for instance, the first thing I thought of with childcare is with the vaccine CDC recommendation yesterday, is that something that goes with that? Is there a particular curriculum?
Okay,
Are there more classes?
your time is up, but you had a second question, and that is?
Well, and I'm also wondering what other type of businesses are eligible, because I did look at the response and recovery, and it goes down the very last page. There's only one matrix there, and it's very broad, so there's no specifics.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for those questions. A couple of responses here, and appreciate that question about this being an incentive. I want to be clear that you could access the child care portion of this, part of the $2 million allocation, as well as the small business component too. If you meet those criteria as a small business who've had that revenue loss, you could apply for that as well.
Right. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Yes.
Yeah, I have Shara Collins. I've got a question regarding the Enterprise Center of Johnson County. And it seems to me this is just a venture capitalist firm. And like Charlotte mentioned, it's a non-governmental organization. And I thank you for letting us know that we can get online and find these financials in detail. But these companies that you're throwing money to, this needs to be transparent to the people and more readily transparent than having to dig through a website and then throwing it at us for, or for you guys for vote on a Thursday morning. It's, this COVID money has become just a money laundering operation. And I'd like to know, I mean, like I said, this Enterprise Center of Johnson County, it's just a venture capitalist firm. That's all it is. They're not doing much as far as they offer brunch-ins a couple times a month for women, for business leaders in the community. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. If not, the item is back before the commission. The motion is in order. Ms. O'Hara, did you?
I had one follow-up question. You stated this before, but I did not catch it. What is the loss of revenue requirement? And for what year is that?
Yeah, loss of revenue of at least 25%.
25%.
When comparing 2019 gross revenue to 21 gross.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Do we have a motion? Ms. Allen Brand or Ms. Hasley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the board authorize the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $7,253,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address struggling small businesses, including diminishing child care capacity within Johnson County, and the allocation of $325,000 from General Fund Reserves, Countywide Support Fund, for one-time direct payment to the Enterprise Center of Johnson County, ECJC, for a local match and assistance in administering these programs.
Ellen Brand, second.
Hanslick made the motion. Allen Brand seconded the motion to authorize the expenditure of the coronavirus funds as well as community service reserve funds as recommended. Any further questions or comments? Ms. Fast.
Yes, I mean, one of the goals, it's not only access, but it's also to help current providers develop profitable, sustainable agencies. Right. And, and if we look at the funding allocation, it's for curriculum, it's for business support. I think that is lost in this. Our JCPRD, which provides before and after school, has a 300-person wait list right now, and they are the largest provider, before and after. So the need right there is shown, and I think in the last few years, we've lost about 40% of our child care providers from the statistics I've saw. So the Greater Kansas City Chamber has well documented the need, and that's one of their key priorities.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to share that ECJC has been here and given a presentation before. And if anybody wants to, I've met with them a couple of times and also met with some of the people that went through, and they do a great job. So I would encourage people to do that. And I don't know, I'm hearing about the shortage. I'm hearing people have waiting lists, and so I don't know if it's just, the area that I'm in, but I am hearing that over and over and over. And, the other Johnson County workforce, there are people that don't have vehicles, they don't have childcare, and they don't have a GED, so they help them get the setter, they help them with transportation, and then help them set for their GED. So those benefits, I think, are crucial to keeping people out of the prison system and helping people be able to provide for themselves. So I'm in
Thank you.
support.
Other comments, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do not disagree that there are needs in all of these areas. And again, I commend Mr. Thompson for trying to put this together. My hesitancy here is, based on the material we've received, and I've looked at it closely, is I am not sure I have the full understanding and comfort with the programmatic controls, the metrics, and the outcomes that we're trying to establish. A lot of it sounds good, but because we don't have something that is presented that we can understand and debate, I have reservations, and my vote will reflect that concern.
Other comments? Ms. O'Hara?
Yes. Obviously, the grants directly to small businesses is very, very important. But I echo Commissioner Ashcraft's concerns that we don't have any way of really understanding what we're really trying to accomplish as far as specifics. And it goes back to the additional $2 million on transit. It's like that we have these great ideas, but we're not focusing down into measurable impacts as to how this money is going to be spent. And I mean, we have $117 million of the first COVID money, and now we have an additional $117 million. And it's that this is quickly going through our hands. It really is. And I just think that we just need to step back. And as far as childcare needs, absolutely, this is a huge problem. I mean, my son and I have a small business, and this is really very, very important. But how do we measure our success? And we do have a fiduciary responsibility of being able to say, okay, we have invested this, and this is what we have accomplished. And I agree with Mr. Ashcraft. I just don't see it, and we have these other priorities. I go back to the Mental Health Crisis Center. We don't have an endless supply of money, and we have to weigh as to what we're going to be really focused on. I'm very concerned about this.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments? If not, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
No.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 5 votes in favor, 2 opposed, motion carried. Next item, I believe, is item number 12.
Consider authorizing the the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $2,085,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address housing and food insecurity within Johnson County, and the allocation of $50,000 from general fund reserves, countywide support fund, for one-time direct payment to the United Community Services, UCS, for assistance in administering these programs.
Mr. Thompson.
Good morning again, Chairman and Commissioners. Maury Thompson, Deputy County Manager. This, as the clerk just indicated, are what we have called our housing and food assistance programs being proposed again for use of the $31 million remaining in our American Recovery Plan Act dollars. On page 2 of the briefing sheet, like the previous item, is the list of proposed uses of this allocation of $2,085,000. The first item there you'll see is the Dignity Project Housing Study, $60,000. A utility assistance through Aging and Human Services of $250,000. A cold weather response, which is hotel voucher, shelter, and case management for 2 winters, 22 and 23, of $500,000. Project 1020 infrastructure shelter requirements to meet code, $225,000. A homeless management information software, HMIS, $250,000. And food insecurity program, which is our food pantry support, like we did with the CARES dollars, of $800,000. You'll notice there that's proposed to serve 40 pantries. One of the questions I was asked this week is who those food pantries are and number of them. Currently, we have 36 identified. So there's a little room for an additional 4 if we have inadvertently missed someone. We think because of our previous grants that we gave out for food pantries, they all have found us, so we're pretty confident we have identified them. But again, a little flexibility if someone shows up. So if someone's representing a food pantry and they're panicking today and they're not on the list, there's still some ability to add you in for support. And with that, Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions regarding any of those proposed uses.
Questions? Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thompson, so is the pantries that are in my district, are they on there?
I'm sure they are.
Yeah. Anyway, I really appreciate that because that has been very instrumental in the community.
All right.
So-
Other questions? Ms. O'Hara?
Yes. Didn't we increase United Community Services, that we normally give them $100,000 a year, and we increased that to $125,000 for 2023? Is that correct?
I don't believe we did. We'll need to verify that because my recollection was when we had that discussion, it was deferred to this point for the use of these one-time dollars rather than ongoing tax support.
Okay, so I would like to know if there's any way that we could find that out. If we've already given them $25,000.
I'm saying head shaking, no, that they weren't.
Okay, so we did not increase their annual, so we did the $100,000 and then this total would be, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thompson, on the supplemental material that you gave to us last week, which wasn't in the briefing sheet, but I don't know what you call it, from Matthew Hansen.
Yes, he's our widow Brian, so
Very
that was
good.
the check that they took on this.
Under cost reasonableness analysis, he makes a statement that I was hoping you could elaborate on or clarify. He said, this is related to the Stop Sexual Violence in Johnson County item, and he makes a statement, this program is likely to have a proportionate impact for every dollar invested. Johnson County will monitor this program and ensure that funds are used appropriately. So can you help me understand what proportionate impact, what they're trying to, what he's trying to say, and how will we at Johnson County, I guess that's someone on staff, will then be monitoring the program to ensure that that's me, I'm sorry, is proportionate. is proportionate a good thing or a bad thing? The way it's phrased, it didn't come across as positive.
So let me start by, Commissioner, happy to attempt to answer that, but that's on the next agenda item.
Oh, well,
All right,
I'm looking at the,
You know, at least you're on top of it.
all right. Any other questions? All
I
right,
wouldn't
again, Is
criticize.
there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Maria Holiday. I have a brief question. I've looked at the briefing sheet, and it gives a timeline, and it also says how they're going to measure, but we've done this before with the first payment, so I'm wondering where can we find the outcomes from the first gift that we gave or the first disbursement? Because I don't see anything, and I want to make sure we're measuring our success.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you. Yes, that information can be found on the website at the location that I indicated earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Happy to talk with you afterwards.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, back before the commission. We do need a motion, I believe. Ms. Hansley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the board authorize the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $2,085,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address housing and food insecurity within Johnson County, and the allocation of $50,000 from general fund reserves, countywide support fund, for one-time direct payment to United Community Services, UCS, for assistance in administering these programs.
Meyer, second.
Ms. Hansley made the motion. Meyer seconded the motion to approve the authorization of the coronavirus funding for the community investment items as recommended. Any further questions or comments? Ms. Fast.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight what a need that this will meet. I just looked up UCS data. We have 10 units of housing for families. We've been averaging over the last years 1,000 students in our school district that are homeless, who then couch search and are not able to have a stable housing situation. And this funding will help these families get stability, get back on their feet, and that these children will be able to go back to school and live in safe, secure housing. So I think this is a need that has been there for a long time. We've heard from many community advocates about this. And this is, I'm really looking forward to the community planning process that will occur and that will bring all the nonprofits, community groups together to discuss this issue. And that is a role of Johnson County. It's a role that I hear from all of my cities. City of Merriam has been dealing with a lot of homelessness. I've heard from the police chief in Leawood. And if you go to the Shawnee Mission Post Office, there is homeless family with children there regularly. And so I just think this is a community-wide conversation, and I'm really supportive of providing the funds to have that conversation and to begin to address this need.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After Commissioner Allenbrand's ridicule, I was able to find my right stack. So I did have a couple of follow-ons. And some of these are observations, but there are a few questions embedded, Mr. Thompson. The housing study, I think, makes a lot of sense. This is an issue that we've been dealing with for several years, and before the county commits anything, we need a community perspective, and that's been the debate. So I understand that. $60,000, quite honestly, doesn't sound like a lot of money, and I understand it's based upon a Lenexa City Council member and an activist, Lee Jost. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his
Reverend.
name. Reverend,
yeah.
yes.
He's a member of our criminal justice advisory
Yes,
council.
yes.
Does an excellent job.
Yeah, and they've been advocating it. So that figure you think is good?
I do thank you for that question. So I can clarify, that is what they are requesting of us. They are matching that with another $60,000, so 120 in total.
Okay, that makes sense.
And Commissioner, if I could add to, I appreciate that first comment you made. You're exactly right, but I would add to that, the idea behind this use of funds is not only that community discussion and plan, but it's, I would suggest, more specific. We have said we need a concrete business plan that shows how you're going to operate and how you're going to be financially viable and sustainable on an ongoing method without ongoing county support.
So Commissioner Ashcroft, you said study. We already did the study, and I know you're using it in a broad term. I would say this is more strategic planning versus.
But the business plan.
Yeah. So I just want to not people say, oh, you already have a study.
No, fair point. Thank you. Yes. The next item, my understanding is that the utilities assistance is for more than 1 year. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe you are correct. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick here, Commissioner.
Well, related to that, and I understand that need, but how do we address for the population that commonly uses these funds, how do we address their energy usage or you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'd like to.
Because just giving them money to.
Well, that's why I brought forth this weatherization. How do we tie, and that's not on here, but that if we, the people who use utility assistance every year, if we could put insulation, they might never need utility assistance. So that isn't on this proposal, but that is part to have weatherization, energy efficiency. And I would like to see those two programs together. As somebody who grew up in the church, it's feed a fish, but not feed a fish, teach someone to learn to fish. And to me, and that's part of this, is how can we assist if you have a veteran, a senior who has air coming through their windows and their utilities are skyrocketing, somewhat energy efficiency would help them get off the utility assistance.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, and if you'd go to your materials with this agenda item, the first piece behind the briefing sheet is that slide 10. And I highlighted the items which relate to this specific action. However, if you'll drop down to item F in the housing column, it's energy efficiency / septic program. So as Commissioner Fast is indicating, that is a piece yet to come, but it would be tied into that utility assistance piece.
And you will be here to make sure that that is carried out.
I will leave that instruction.
Then on the next one, the cold weather hotel vouchers. How did you come up with that particular figure, and how do we measure its impact on the needs, both short term and long term? And I would say that those are questions similar to the next item on the 221-654 shelter and case management system.
So I think you're all aware that Johnson County does not have a year-round homeless shelter. We have a cold weather shelter, Project 1020, that operates, as the name suggests, during the coldest parts of the year, during times when temperatures dip below a certain amount. It is a very limited in number of beds capacity that they're able to serve. So the idea behind the hotel voucher program is if and when they're at capacity, rather than literally turn people out into the cold without any shelter, there's a voucher program. That's one thing that I think the nonprofit governmental sector learned during the pandemic, that was a successful way to get people out of the elements. like the previous item, this is for two years. So how the amount was determined was based on capacity of the shelter and previous year's experience.
And Mr. Wolf will be health, or what's his department called now?
Aging and Human
Aging
Services.
and Human Services will be monitoring this, or will these funds just be turned over to 1020?
So a combination.
Okay.
1020 will be one of the partners, but the vouchers itself, that is a program that will be utilized by Safe Home, our emergency shelter for domestic violence. The Johnson County Mental Health Center, is unfortunately engaged in outreach to the homeless population who are dealing with mental health issues. And then Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas is the third partner.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Next question, Homeless Management Information System. There's some reference to assist local agencies listed in question 6, and I for the life of me, cannot find a question 6, much less 1 through 5.
So let me look at that one real quick here. I think what he was referring back to was probably the application that they submitted. So when he talks about the agencies, that's our continuum on care in Johnson County that all of our health and human services providers who are working with vulnerable populations participate with. And this is the system who manages that data regarding homelessness.
Okay. Thank you. And final comment, I did appreciate the attempt in the briefing sheet to delineate performance measures. I'm reading that health and or Aging and Human Services will be responsible for that and will be reporting that back to us regularly or periodically?
A combination then. All of the grant recipients are required to report on outcomes and provide that information back to us. So Aging and Human Services will be doing their part, but others will be doing likewise.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. O'Hara?
Yes, okay. So all of these programs, it looks to me, this is not just going to be a one-time expenditure. This is going to be a need that is ongoing, and that we are using one-time monies to pay for it at this point. And we are going to be looking at putting this in our budget to continue this because we're not going to have these funds available like we have now. Is that correct?
Partially. Some of these are addressing ongoing needs, and some of them are one-time needs. The
Software.
study or business plan, for instance, the software, one-time needs. As far as ongoing responsibility of county government, quite frankly, that would be a decision. There is no guarantee. These are one-time federal funds for designated purposes.
We've also, in the past years, used community development block grant funds for some of these activities, so that also is available.
Yeah, and again, we're very clear in communicating to that. Can I stand here and give you some guarantee that in the future, one of them might show up and say, hey, that was really helpful money, I'd like more? Absolutely not. That's always a possibility.
Right. Okay, thank you.
We had a motion.
We do have a motion on the floor, so the clerk will please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor, motion carried. Next item.
Item number 13, consider authorizing the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $565,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address keeping our families and communities safe.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes, final item here from me this morning, Chairman. Maury Thompson, Deputy County Manager. Again, as the clerk indicated, this is what we're calling our community safety programs, which was one categorization. The longer title is Keeping Our Families and Communities Safe. 4 items proposed here, $35,000 for our Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee audiovisual equipment, My Resource Connection mobile application, $120,000. Midwest Wellness Mental Health Center improvements, $100,000. And the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault, or MOXA, funding for them of $310,000. Again, happy to answer questions. And before we do that, I should have said on the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee, that $35,000, that is meant to be a Johnson County as whole contribution towards that. The Missouri side of the state line involved in our Regional Homeland Security, they will be asked to make their contribution as well.
Okay, questions? That's fast.
I know this clubhouse model was a real favorite in the Kansas legislature when I was there giving testimony, and one of the big hiccups was they were supposed to get lottery money and they could never, the funding source has been taking a long time. Have they received that yet?
They have, and thank you for that question. Just for everyone else's benefit, the clubhouse model is a model of mental health support that Sedgwick County has utilized for numbers of years and maybe a decade plus, I'm not sure. There's been a desire in Johnson County to replicate that for a number of years. Again, we were fortunate, I believe it was last legislative session, where the Kansas legislature approved funding for Johnson County to replicate theirs. This $100,000 contribution would be to the organization to make the physical modifications to their new space to host this clubhouse model here in Johnson County.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Ashcraft.
Mr. Thompson, do I need to repeat my question on appropriate, or not appropriate, proportional impact? Can you tell me what the thought process is, or how you're interpreting that, or how we should interpret that? This is the MOXA
right
item.
Let me get to the right page so I've got it in front of me, Commissioner.
Because based upon what's presented, about 6,500 people will be supported by this, and I wasn't sure if that was over 2 years or if that was one of 2 years. So it's anywhere between $25 a head to $50 a head, and in some ways that doesn't seem like a lot of money, but what are we expecting from this? What are they saying we're supposed to be getting for this?
So
what's the outcome, Mr. Thompson?
Let me find. They have submitted a wealth of information here, so let me see if I can pull it out. I know as you and I talked yesterday, I believe, I found a reference to the services that they provide, and part of it was education programs that they were doing for the community. So there's a number of different ways that they provide their service. So I'm making some assumption here that that's why you see the variation in amount. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry, I found it. So they are proposing 5 activities for which they would use these funds: advocacy services, counseling, direct counseling, education, organizational capacity to respond to the need, and like I'm missing, well, they've just got 4 listed here. So those 4 items are the services that they provide.
Okay, thank you.
But that doesn't answer my question about proportionate benefit, or,
Yeah, and the proportionate reference
Impact,
was from
proportionate.
Whit O'Brien, I believe you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not, quite frankly, sure what he meant by proportional.
I suggest we look at the dictionary. Maybe that will help. All right, Ms. Hansley.
Yes, if I might, Mr. Thompson,
You-
I serve on the Johnson County Advisory Board for MOXA, and for those who don't know, MOXA is a metro-wide organization, but they specifically provide services in Johnson County. You mentioned some, if someone is sexually assaulted or raped, they can call MOXA, and MOXA will meet them at the hospital and help them through that process. They provide mental health counseling. A big part of what they do in Johnson County is provide education in schools, and to various community groups about sexual assault. So I can't answer Commissioner Ashcraft's specific question, but I don't know if it has to do with, because they provide metro-wide services, when they're talking proportional, it might be particularly about the services provided in Johnson County. And I can certainly testify to their effectiveness and need for their services here. They're the only ones that provide that in Johnson County.
Thank you. Ms. O'Hara?
Thank you. So in the briefing sheet, it says the program is estimated to serve 460 victims. So, and you,
If you, the supplemental information that Mr. Thompson provided provides expense types and descriptions and elaborates on that in terms of the various types of programs have different constituencies. Sometimes they overlap. And the total supposedly is 6,500. It's on, well, it doesn't have a page number, but it's the second page of the briefing sheet that Mr. Thompson handed out last week.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're referring, I believe, to the eligibility review memo, Commissioner?
Yes, sir, by Matthew
okay,
Hansen.
so is the number 6,500 or is it 460?
I don't know.
Okay. Other questions? All right, do we have a motion? We do need a motion, do we?
We need a motion.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I can do that.
Ms. Fast?
I move the board authorize the allocation of coronavirus SLFRF received from the United States Department of the Treasury in the amount of $565,000 for the purpose of funding direct community investment programs to address keeping our families and communities safe.
Ellen Brand, second.
Fast made the motion to approve the request and the authorization as recommended. Alan Brand seconded the motion. I'm sorry, I failed to ask for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this item? All right, if not, it is back before the commission. Any comments before I call for the roll call? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hanslick, Commissioner Hanslick, thank you for your observation. And that interpretation may be correct, but as I read through this, the phrase that makes it difficult for me to understand is that this proportionate impact will help ensure that funds are used appropriately. And it just wasn't clear to me. That could be the explanation, but I wasn't quite sure how that fit in. Mr. Chairman, I think there is potentially value to all four of these, but I have reservations about the MOXA proposal because of the lack of clarity and the $35,000 for the Mid-America Council funding. That I'm not sure that, for me, that's the best use of that resource. The other two items I am supportive of, and so I'd like to ask that the motion be divided, that the MOXA and MARC item be one motion, and the MyRC and the Wellness Center be a second motion.
There is no MARC item.
The maker of the motion, is that okay?
I guess I don't understand what you're saying about MARC. Which is MARC?
That's
the
audio-visual
RHSCC.
update.
But that's not really to them. That's the whole region.
Right.
And is the money going towards them, to them?
Yes, that's where the equipment, that's where the RHSCC functions out of, on behalf of Johnson County and the Missouri
Okay.
side.
I don't, that's
okay.
fine.
Pardon?
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Okay, all right, so once again, the two items will be separated. The first item will be, or items?
MOXA and MARC.
It's not MARC.
Well,
It's the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee.
I'm just looking at what's highlighted by
Well,
Mr.
That is
Thompson.
part of MARC.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, the Regional Homeland Security Committee. All right,
Thank you, and the MOXA monies.
okay. So those two items will be voted on last. Ms. Hansley?
Yes, I appreciate Commissioner Ashcraft's concerns. I agree, the information that's presented in terms of MOXA is a bit confusing. There are a lot of numbers in there, and they're not necessarily making complete sense to me in terms of the potential impact. But knowing what MOXA does in Johnson County, I'm comfortable supporting it. But I would appreciate more clarity from them as to exactly what outcomes they expect from this, using these funds. And if we could get that, that would be really helpful. You know,
Well, MOXA has done an outstanding job in Johnson County over the decades, and they do excellent work. Clarification, so the other two items, besides the one just noted, would be?
Midwest Center for Mental Health and responsive MyRC is what Mr. Thompson had highlighted.
Okay.
And-
All right, well, we'll vote on those two first. Any
Mr.
further
Chairman,
questions?
If I could respond to Commissioner Hanslick. Commissioner Hanslick, thank you for that observation. I understand the role of MOXA, and I think it is a value-added effort, but based on what's presented is what I am struggling with. So that's what the reflection of my vote.
All right. Clerk will please call the roll on the first two items in regards to mental health and the other item.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Ms. O'Hara, what was your vote? I didn't hear that one.
I said yes.
All right. I have 7 votes in favor on that portion of the motion. It carried. Now, the second motion will be the MOXA and My Resource.
Yes, sir.
All right.
No,
So-
no, I'm sorry.
Regional Homeland.
The Regional Homeland.
Homeland Security, right. Okay. All right.
Mark and MOXA.
Right. Okay.
I have a question.
Right
before we
ahead.
take- The Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Committee, I am not familiar with this, and is there a little bit more clarification that you could give me on that?
So
please?
I'm smiling. I may call the Kansas side co-chair of that committee to the
Thank you.
That committee
Thank
has been in
you.
place for decades.
Yeah, while he's walking
And,
up here, yeah.
so-
It's all law enforcement in the region, emergency management, all public safety entities. I'm talking about how we strengthen and protect this region from Homeland Security.
And this would also include cybersecurity?
Yes, absolutely it does.
Mr. Connor, anything you want to add?
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Joe Connor, Assistant County Manager, and the Kansas side co-chair for the Regional Homeland Security Coordinating Council. As the Chairman mentioned, there's been a Kansas and Missouri side co-chair for 20 years now, I believe. So I'm fortunate to be in that role currently. Cybersecurity is actually becoming a priority for the region. The funders that we receive funding from, which are the federal governments and the states, they put a percentage of funding we have to spend on cybersecurity related training issues, those kind of things. So that's definitely become a part of the regional plan.
Okay, so this is becoming one of their focus points is cybersecurity?
Yes.
And that Johnson County needs to take cybersecurity extremely seriously.
Well, I'm pretty sure we do that already.
We already do. We already do.
As a part of the region, yes, we want to be a player with that as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? If not, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
No.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 6 votes in favor, 1 opposed, motion carried. Are there any other items, Mr. Thompson?
No.
All right.
Goodness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to reports and communications. I will remind everybody of the hour. We have agenda review yet before us and a scheduled 1 p.m. Committee of the Whole meeting. We'll have to make adjustments. So keep that in mind as we proceed. Ms. Bostoke Ferguson.
Okay, we have 3 items today. The first one's contractor licensing program. And in your packet, Jay is here if you have questions, but I will just say that they have to give you an update on their fees, and it's the same level. So if you have questions, Jay is here. But he also wanted to, if he could come to the podium very quickly and invite you to the contractor licensing luncheon coming up, if you want to cover that pretty quickly, Jay. And then I'll see if you guys have questions on the fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Jay Leipzig. I also wanted to introduce Kira King is our new contractor licensing program manager, came to us from the Department of Health and Environment. I think most of you have met her before, but just to get acquainted with her again. But yes, wanted to invite you to our fall seminar, which is October 31st through November the 4th. This is our large seminar that we have every year. So I certainly wanted to invite you for lunch over the Overland Park Convention Center, and it should be a great activity, as it always is. So, thank you.
Is that on October 31st, the luncheon?
Yes, we have lunch every day.
Oh, so, yeah, I went last year, but I don't, kind of vague, so.
Yeah, I
just pick
believe
a
it goes
day
from
and go.
11:30 to 1 o'clock for
Okay.
lunch.
You only want us to go once.
Oh, no.
Hey, you could go multiple times.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, go right ahead.
I know that and I've spoken to you about this before, is that there is a reserve in your fund, and that there's always a concern that it might be touched, and can you elaborate on that?
Sure, Commissioner, I'd be happy to address that. Yeah, our budget is, when it's submitted, and the contract licensing is an enterprise fund. It does not utilize general funding, and it's completely self-supported. But they do have a unallocated fund balance that's there. And that funding, the board voted on October the 10th that their projections for 2023 are consistent with what they had considered before. So that's why they voted to keep the fee the same. They reduced those fees, and that item was before you last year. So yes, there's that amount there. That amount is strictly for activities for contractor licensing.
So they have their dedicated reserves?
Yes, they have dedicated reserves.
Okay, thank you.
It has been self-supporting, I think, since the beginning, several years ago. So that's always been the case.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, this was just a member of the board over the contractor licensing. He had contacted me, and I just wanted to have the clarification from Jay.
I see. Yes, well, the full board should be aware of all of this, so yes. All right, next.
Okay, next item is the SERI report for October. It's mostly dealing with the latest in October information. So very high level, the unemployment rate was 2.6%. Year-to-date, the single-family home sales is down by 15% compared to last year. Single-family building permits issued is a 24% decrease. And the rest of the information is in your packet if you have questions. The last item is an
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have a comment on the building permits and construction activity. Obviously, the increase in the interest rates are impacting the home building industry and the real estate industry significantly. And we, as a governing body, are going to have to be extremely sensitive to that. And that was why my question to our appraiser, Beauvais, that what the impact that we have the cutoff on our valuations of September 30th, and that if there's significant impact to the value between that and 1st of January, how people can appeal their valuations. This is a very, very fluid situation, and it is not business as usual. I mean, these numbers are pretty startling. So I just want to caution my colleagues as we go forward that we're going to have to be extremely, extremely cognizant of what is happening in the market.
Yeah. Several of us have been aware of that for many decades, and we continue to be aware of that information. Anything else?
I do want to clarify the appeal period, and I'll ask Joe Connor to clarify or correct that information.
The opportunity. Joe Connor, Assistant County Manager. Just wanted to make sure and clarify, there is not an appeal process that's happening for individual taxpayers now. That happens in the spring.
Correct.
When we get notices.
Correct.
You had said
As-
between now and
correct.
January.
Well, I'm saying that if there's a decrease in value between now and January, that people can use that information in their appeal for their, in 2023. That's what I had asked Bo about, because of the cutoff on making their metrics for evaluating the value of their homes and businesses. It ends at the end of September, so that it gives them time to structure this. And my question to him was that if the values decrease between then and the first of the year, will people have that opportunity to bring that information into the appeal process in 2023?
Happens, yeah.
Right.
Any
Right.
appropriate
I didn't
data.
hear it that way. I heard you say
Right.
they could start their appeals now, and I.
No,
it's not-
no, this is for the future.
Understood.
Our valuation that will be established on the 1st of January. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify it. Okay, thank you.
Again, I would restate, any appropriate data that the homeowner has or the business owner has that needs to be presented at the time of the appeal should be presented. Anything else? Ms.
Yes,
Ferguson?
Yes, thank you. One more item is an evergreen update as a follow-up from our discussion in the last few weeks, and I'll ask Maury Thompson to give an update.
Thank you, Penny. Maury Thompson, Deputy County Manager. This morning, I believe during the break, I placed at your spot on the dais an update memorandum to the manager's report, laying out two sections to the proposed RFP related to Evergreen Living. One is scope of services, and the second is the qualifications. And then thirdly, on the back is what we've called proposer solution, some items that we believe anyone responding to this RFP once issued should be prepared to address. Purpose of providing this to the board is, based on our conversation regarding this, there was some desire expressed on the part of the board to see how we shape this. So I provide this to you and ask you to review and give me any feedback that you might have on these two very important components of the RFP within the next very few days, if you would, so we can get this finalized and get this out on the street, as they say. I will share that I continue to be contacted by folks who are interested in this item for conversations, which, quite frankly, have been helpful in helping to shape the process going forward. So, information for your review.
Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thompson, not to put too fine of a point on this, what is the transition plan on this item given your departure?
So I believe Mr. Connor is going to be leading this effort.
Well,
on
let's
my
get
departure.
it done then. No,
Thank you.
Very
Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Before we turn to commission comments, the hour is at 12:31. We have the 1 p.m. Committee of the Whole, which that time needs to be adjusted. We have a request for a 15-minute executive session. I'm going to suggest that, again, depending on what the commission wants to do, that we have a cold agenda for next week, or we may have to push the agenda review back to at following lunch at sometime around 1:30 or at 1:45. What's your preference?
Clarify the presentation, is it a cow or a study session? How long will?
It's a committee of the whole, probably take about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Any,
I'm fine with a cold agenda.
all right,
Majority of the items are planning applications, Gardner and Olathe.
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Well, there is
There is one
the
item I draw
DAs.
your attention to. The
Yeah,
district
DAs.
attorney has a request for additional personnel, which I think, take a close look at it. I've talked with the DA. I'm in favor of that request. So anyway, all right, we will have a cold agenda for next week. And the request for the executive session for 15 minutes. It's 12:33. Can we start that at 12:45?
Yes.
All right. For 15 minutes Following the executive session, we will take a hour or 45-minute break for lunch, and then we'll come back for the committee of the whole. Does that concur? All right. Do I hear a motion on the executive session?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the last.
I can do it.
Okay, go
Ms.
ahead.
Hensley, go ahead.
I move that the board recess its open meeting and convene an executive session at 12:45 PM.
Let's make that 12:50. We've got commission comments.
Okay, 12:50. At 12:50 PM for a total period of 15 minutes for the purpose of discussing matters relating to the security of county operations and to preserve the security of county operations and for the purpose of receiving the advice of counsel and to protect attorney-client confidentiality and to reconvene an open session in this room at approximately 1:05 PM or as soon thereafter as the executive session may end.
Do I hear a second?
Alan Brand, second.
Hanslick made the motion, Allen Brand seconded the motion for the executive session. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers.
Myers, aye.
Commissioner O'Hara.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick, aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Allenbrand.
Alan Brand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert, aye. I have 7 votes in favor. Just a question, the conference room should be available, is that right?
Correct, BOCC.
All right. Thank you very much. Turning to commission comments, Ms. Fast.
Yes, last Saturday I joined the Johnson County Parks and Recreation Board with a tour of the Sunflower ammunition plant, the park land that we will be transferred to our parks. It took an hour and a half to drive through all the parkland. It was just gorgeous. Saw the Officers Club, which is the oldest building on a pond, also underground area where they shot off tested explosive. I think the Parks is going to keep that as a historic site. And then Monday was the ribbon cutting for the art piece at the Middlebrook. It's just incredible. Go there at nighttime or when the sun is going down. It's going to be one of the most Instagram moments of Johnson County in the next few years. I mean, people are just flocking to see it. I also wanted to update Douglas County finally got licensed on their psychiatric center as a private psychiatric hospital. There's still not anywhere in the state of Kansas that you can get a license for a crisis intervention center. That licensure is not available yet, and they still don't know when they're going to open because of staffing issues. So now they have a provisional license to be a private psychiatric hospital, similar to Osawatomie. So it's a huge commitment for Douglas County to have a licensed hospital. And they still don't know when they can open that. And so it's been sitting, a brand new built building, it's been sitting there for months.
Thank you.
How big is their
Ms.
building?
Allen Brand.
I can talk to you later.
Okay.
Commissioner Allen Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I attended the KAC, Kansas Association of Counties, and they had really informative meetings. I also shared with Commissioner O'Hara, there was a lot of cowboy hats and cowboy boots, and I thought maybe she might want to attend next year.
Thank you, Mr. Ashcraft.
Nothing, sir.
Ms. Hanslick.
Yeah, just a couple things. One is I do want to recognize that this week is National Friends of Libraries Week, and we are very fortunate to have a wonderful Friends of the Johnson County Library that do all kinds of great things, recycling books and getting them back out into the hands of our residents. We did have a brief housing subcommittee meeting earlier this week. Nothing of great note to report, but I think we'll have more information coming in the future. So thank you.
Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the Johnson County Parks and Recreation District Public Arts Gateway presentation that you mentioned earlier at Meadowbrook Park, and it is a very impressive piece of art, whether it's day or night, and also whether it's hot or cold. It was a cool evening.
Chill.
Yes. And then attended the Johnson County Parks and Recreation regular district meeting last night, and also the KCATA Finance Committee meeting earlier this week.
Thank you. Ms. O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So being the recognition of the arts Humanities Month, I want the board to know that I am a musician and that I write music on a regular basis and that I also am a self-published poet. So there is great value. I used music in homeschooling when my daughter, she came to my home when she was 10, and I very much understand the value of the humanities in our educational process. We also used art. We actually created our own workbooks through art. And if anyone would like me to share the body of work, and my daughter's brother was also with us for like 6 or 7 months, and it was incredibly successful. Taylor, who chose not to stay with our family, he went to an uncle's, and he had been struggling in the Grandview School District, and he was on the honor roll in Blue Valley. So I truly understand the value of the humanities. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that I would encourage staff as soon as it is possible to please debrief the board in public on the CONAC issue, because it's blowing up everywhere, and I'm getting a lot of questions about that. And so those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. I have one item reminding the Audit Committee that we have a meeting Wednesday. That's October the 26th, 1:30 p.m. in rooms 202, 204. So we are in recess. We will begin our executive session in just a few minutes in the conference room. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And our committee of the whole meeting will scheduled to begin at 1:45. Thank you.
You know how many times I've said, was it saying